good, kids. Now come and get your Ritalin.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. Welcome to the program. The phones are open. If you want to join the show, you can bring up absolutely whatever you want here on broadcast radio, online streaming. We've got a podcast as well. You can put us into your ears in a variety of different ways. You can go to freetalklive.com to learn more about that, learn more about the show. The phone number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian.
And Chris.
Chris, did you ever do any debating in like high school or college or something like that? I was never in the debate class, but I think there was a time when I think it was just like English class where they did do some amount of debating. So there was a little bit, I think, in my past.
I'm sure I've done it like in like some sort of history or social class or something. But
I didn't join the like debate team or anything like that. I didn't really particularly enjoy it that much. But it is something that, you know, people who are into that, they see it as a rigorous way to defend a certain position. I think in a lot of cases in debates, you sometimes are asked to take a position that isn't even your own, right? So you're told you have to defend a position that is maybe the opposite from what you believe, and you have to bone up on what the other side would say, on what somebody who's not you would argue, and argue from that position. So it's kind of like an interesting intellectual experiment, from what I understand. I've watched some debates recently. There was the really excellent debate that they had at the Warehouse, which is a gathering place in New Hampshire, in Ware, New Hampshire, that Free Staters are frequently at, and there's various different seminars and hangouts and movie showings or whatever it is that they're doing out there regularly. But they had a debate with our very own Jay Noon, who represented fiat currency.
Oh, boy.
Jeremy Kaufman from Library, LBRY.com, who represented cryptocurrency. And then Silver Dave represented precious metals, specifically silver, because that's kind of his thing. And they had a debate between the three of them, like, you know, which is the best form of money. It went on for 2 hours. It was really interesting. That video is online. I think if you look at the Free Keen Odyssey channel, you'll find it. Was it on Free Keen? No, you know what? It might actually only be on Joe's channel, Breaking the Flaw. I don't remember where it is, but
I saw part of it.
Yeah.
I don't recall either where it is, though.
But normally they like ask people in advance of the debate where they're at. They ask the audience what they believe on the topic, and then they take a count. And then at the end of the debate, they ask the audience again the same question, and they take another count, and they see how many audience members have moved in one direction or another. And that's how they determine who, quote unquote, wins the debate. So that's my understanding of how it works. I came across an interesting story last night from the Free Press at thefp.com saying that at some high school debates, apparently debate is no longer allowed. Some judges in these debates are making their stance clear. If you don't agree with the judge's positions on things, you will lose the debate. So here's the story. And if you want to comment on this, maybe you're in high school right now or college and you're seeing this actually happening, or you've seen this happen and you want to comment, the number here is 603-283-6160. James Fishback is the author. He says, my 4 years on a high school debate team in Broward County, Florida taught me to challenge ideas, question assumptions, and think outside the box. It also helped me overcome a terrible childhood stutter. And I wasn't half bad. I placed 9th my first time at the National Speech and Debate Association Nationals, 6th at the Harvard National, and was runner-up at the Emory National. After college, between 2017 and 2019, I coached the debate team at an underprivileged high school in Miami. There I witnessed the pillars of high school debate start to crumble. Since then, the decline has continued from a competition that rewards evidence and reasoning to one that punishes students for what they say and how they say it. First, some background. Imagine a high school sophomore on the debate team. She's been given her topic about a month in advance, but she won't know who her judge is until hours before her debate round. During that time, perhaps she'll pace the halls as I did at the 2012 national tournament in Indianapolis. She'll scroll on her phone to look up her judge's name on a website called Tabroom. That's not Taproom, it's Tabroom, Tabroom, a public database maintained by the NSDA, that's the National Speech and Debate Association. That's where judges post their quote-unquote paradigms, which explain what they look for during a debate. If a judge prefers competitors not quote-unquote spread, speak a mile a minute, then debaters will moderate their pace. If a judge emphasizes impacts, the reason why an argument matters, debaters adjust accordingly. But let's say when the high school sophomore clicks on Tabroom, she sees that her judge is Lila Lavender, the 2019 National Debate Champion, whose paradigm reads, quote, "Before anything else, including being a debate judge, I am a Marxist-Leninist Maoist. I cannot check the revolutionary proletariat science at the door when I'm judging. I will no longer evaluate and thus never vote for rightist, capitalist, imperialist positions / arguments. Examples of arguments of this nature are as follows: fascism good, capitalism good, imperialist war good, neoliberalism good, defenses of U.S. or otherwise bourgeois nationalism, Zionism or normalizing Israel, colonialism good, U.S. white fascist policing good, etc."
This is just so weird because the whole idea is to evaluate how well somebody argued a position, not that they agreed with the position.
Yeah, this is crazy. And how it is that this person can qualify as a judge in a debating competition by presumably overseen by this NSDA.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they're assigned the position that they have to take, right? The debaters. So
I think so.
You lose or win effectively, according to this judge, based on what position you're assigned.
That's what it sounds like.
What's the point of debating? What's the point of the club?
That's the whole point of the article here, is to say that debating is basically dead at this point, because there's so many judges now, I guess, or some amount of them, a significant enough amount, that are like this Lila Lavender, who just will tell you straight up, if you don't agree with her particular political paradigm, you're sunk. So how does that sophomore feel as she walks into her debate round? How will knowing that information about the judge change the way she makes her case, if she can even make?
Yeah, how do you I mean, are you, if you get assigned, one side, are you supposed to then argue the side of your competitor?
I don't know.
I mean, that would just be crazy.
Can you, if you're a participant in one of these debates, can you say, look, I can't debate in front of this person? Can you just, object essentially and demand a different judge? I don't know. If you know anything about this organization, you can give us a call here at 603-283-6160. But how does someone like this, Lila Lavender, even get appointed as a judge? I mean, I get that she's the 2019 National Debate Champion, so that gives her some kind of cred, but that just means she can debate. That doesn't necessarily mean she can judge a debate. Anyway.
Sounds like she doesn't want debate.
No, it doesn't. And she's not the only one. Traditionally, high school students would have encountered a judge like former West Point debater Henry Smith, whose paradigm asks students to focus on clarity over speed and reminds them that every argument should explain exactly how the person will win the debate. In the past few years, however, judges with paradigms tainted by politics and ideology are becoming common. Debate judge Subham Gupta's paradigm reads, quote, "If you are discussing immigrants in a round and describe the person as illegal, I will immediately stop the round, give you the loss with low speaks, meaning low speaker points, give you a stern lecture, and then talk to your coach. I will not have you making the debate space unsafe."
Wow.
Yeah. So this person is saying that specific words, are off limits. And look, I don't disagree with the opinion. I personally don't like calling people illegal. I think it's a ridiculous position to take.
Same here.
But that doesn't mean that if somebody said something in a debate that I was somehow the judge of, that I disagreed with, the judges shouldn't take that stuff into factor. Debate judge Kriti Sharma agrees. Under her list of, quote, things that will cause you to immediately lose, or rather automatically lose, number 3 on her list is referring to immigrants as illegal. Should a high school student automatically lose and be publicly humiliated for using a term that's not only ubiquitous in the media and politics, but also, well, according to the person writing this, accurate? I don't agree. Once students have been exposed to enough of these partisan paradigms, they internalize that point of view and adjust their arguments going forward. That's why you rarely see students present arguments in favor of capitalism, defending Israel, or challenging affirmative action. Most students choose not to fight this coercion. They see it as a necessary evil that's required to win debates and secure the accolades, scholarships, and college acceptance letters that come with the winning.
Yeah, this is very true. Even when I remember when I was in high school, it's the whole idea is like, oh, you better join some sort of club. Mm-hmm. It doesn't even matter what it is, but you better be involved in some sort of activity so that when you apply to college, they know who to pick.
What club were you in?
That's a good question. I don't even remember the name of the club, but I did actually. I was in a club for for basically because that's what the college people advised.
Right.
It's like it's I think it's kind of interesting, but I feel like it was almost a way to kind of weed out the kids who were they couldn't weed kids out based on race anymore, so they weeded them out based on whether they were in a club. And of course all the white kids then joined a club, and
Interesting.
But I don't know if that was the case or not, but that's what it seemed like to me.
So, I mean, in a way, this debate restriction story here is for the students that are participating in it, just kind of like an introduction to what they're going to likely experience in college, right? Which is teachers that have a specific political viewpoint. We hear about it all the time, that want to shove their political viewpoint down the throats of all of their college students. So from that perspective, what's happening to the debate clubs isn't really that different than what's happened at the college level itself. So, I mean, it's not too surprising, I guess.
Yeah, I've seen this at sort of from the opposite, I think, perspective, from more of a right Christian.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it was an English class in college where he tried to basically push religion down, our throats.
Oh God!
And it was very bizarre.
So on paper, the NDSA or NSDA rejects what these judges are doing. Its rules state, quote, judges should decide the round as it's debated, not based on their personal beliefs. Founded in 1925, the NSDA chooses the debate topics and facilitates hundreds of tournaments, including the annual national tournament in Arizona, where 6,000 students will compete. The NSDA did not respond to emails and phone calls asking for comment. A random scroll through Tab Room reveals there are still sane judges out there. Amanda Marshall's paradigm says, I've been a trial lawyer for 25 years. I like clash, quality evidence from qualified sources, comparative analysis, and crystallization in last rebuttals. Don't take anything for granted. You have to explain your arguments, why your evidence is compelling, and how the arguments weigh in the round. It's your job to persuade me and communicate your positions in a way that is effective, and that is how you will win my ballot. I don't like whining, personal attacks, dominance, aggression, and disrespect. I do appreciate professionalism, kindness, and integrity. Or this paradigm from debate judge Stephen McCartney, quote, my favorite debates are rigorous but friendly. I actually appreciate when one debater accepts one of their opponent's arguments as valid, but still persuades me that they should win the round. I'll make my decision based on who is the most persuasive, but persuading me will be done by showing with evidence that one side upholds their value and criterion better than the other side. In order to do this, a debater must speak slowly and clearly enough for me to hear and understand the arguments. Unquote. Unfortunately for students and their parents, there are countless judges at tournaments across the country whose biased paradigms disqualify them from being impartial adjudicators of debate. From, quote, I will drop America First framing in a heartbeat to, I will listen to conservative-leaning arguments, but be careful. Judges are making it clear they are not only tilting the debate in a left-wing direction, they will also penalize students who don't adhere to their ideology. And again, if you've been in the debating world and you want to comment on how it appears to have changed over time, you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. In the past year, Lindsay Schrodeck has judged over 120 students at tournaments in Massachusetts, New York, and New Jersey. The NSDA has certified her with its Cultural Competency Badge, which indicates she has completed a brief online training module in evaluating students with consideration for their identity and cultural background. Until last month, Schrodeck's paradigm told debaters, quote, "If you are white, don't run arguments with impacts that primarily affect people of color. These arguments should belong to the communities that they affect." So she's saying if you're white, you can't make an argument that somebody who is a different color than you would make? I mean, that's just insane.
Does that mean a white person can only make a white supremacist argument and a black person can only make a Black Lives argument or something like that?
Well, no, she's only specifically restricting white people here is what it sounds like. Her paradigm was updated to eliminate that quote. When asked why, she said she didn't eliminate the idea itself and that she, quote, "doesn't know if it's exactly my place to say what arguments will or won't make marginalized communities feel unsafe in the debate space." So there's that safety concept that's come up again here by some of these judges. They don't want unsafe words or people to feel unsafe. And it's like, this is something we've heard just so much about over recent years, is this idea of a quote-unquote safe space. And to these people, a safe space isn't a place where you won't get shot to death if you win the debate, or somebody won't jump you in the parking lot. A safe space is a place where no one gets their feelings hurt, where no one in the room, no debater or judge or somebody watching the performance would be upset about some of the words that come out of another person's mouth. And it's just like, this is debating. This is where you take a position that inherently has disagreement involved in it. Somebody in the room, the person you're against, is it disagreeing with you. People in the audience presumably are attending the debate because they might feel one way or another on this issue, and they could change their mind based on that. I mean, that is it seems like that meets their definition of unsafe. There's ideas being thrown around here that might be disagreeable.
And the humorous part is, like, it's like you're supposed to argue a point. It's better when you argue a point that you disagree with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or a side that you disagree with. That's kind of the whole point of the debate club, as I understand it.
Yeah, well, that's one reason why I don't really care about debate, because, like, why would I want to argue for another side? I understand, like, it's an intellectual rigor kind of thing. Right. It's just not for me.
It's entirely about the intellectual aspect of it.
Yeah.
You know? So the idea that you would, like, not debate it, or, like, yeah, it just sounds crazy.
Or be afraid to tread into a certain area. Be afraid to tread into certain arguments. Be afraid to make certain points because you're worried that somebody is going to get their panties in a wad about what you say.
I mean, how would you even argue, like, for example, immigration, right? How would you argue against illegal immigration but not use the word illegal immigration or illegal?
Undocumented worker.
So, okay. So I guess you could maybe do it. But it does seem very bizarre.
This is the kind of tiptoeing, this politically correct speak that has gone completely off the rails now. I mean, it was bad 20 years ago, but it's even worse now. As the person who writes the story here, thefp.com, points out, he says, "I disagree. In debate, unsafe, quote-unquote, conversations should be encouraged, even celebrated. How better for young people from all backgrounds to bridge the divides that tear us apart and to discover what unites them. The debate I knew taught me to think and learn and care about issues that affected people different from me. We've come a long way from the 2004 Democratic National Convention, when an obscure state senator from Illinois named Barack Obama said, 'If there's a child on the south side of Chicago who can't read, that matters to me, even if it's not my child. If there's an Arab family or an Arab American family being rounded up without the benefit of an attorney or due process, that threatens my civil liberties. It's that fundamental belief I am my brother's keeper. I am my sister's keeper that makes this country work. It's what allows us to pursue our individual dreams, yet still come together as a single American family." Unquote. 20 years ago, the NSDA I knew encouraged me to think and speak about how policies and issues impacted different communities, but not anymore. One judge gives people of color priority in her debates. In general, students voluntarily and mutually disclose their evidence to the opponents or their opponents before the debate round, as both teams benefit from spending more time with the other team's evidence. But ex-Braithwaite, who's judged 169 debate rounds with 340 students, has in her own disclosure policy in her paradigm, which uses a racial epithet, one, here's what it says, quote, N-words, which it's written out, don't have to disclose to you. Two, disclose to N-words. This is racial discrimination, of course. If you're black, you get to keep your evidence to yourself and have a competitive advantage. If you're not black, you must disclose all of your evidence to your opponent and accept a competitive disadvantage. I mean, how does this even fly? How do people like this stay in this organization? I mean, I guess that's just a testament to how completely backwards and corrupt that this particular organization has become. And we're talking about the NSDA, that is the National Speech and Debate Association. The fact that people who are just wearing a bias on their sleeve are allowed to be a judge. I mean, it would be one thing if this judge just kept that quiet and then just did it in the moment, right? Like if they just revealed their biases in the debate. But here they are just showing it right there on a public database of what to expect from them.
You think that would be some sort of disqualification as
That's
a
what
judge?
I'm saying. It's just unbelievable to me that this is allowed. It says here, students who win under this rubric may view their victory as flawed, as if their win isn't a reflection of their hard work. Those who lose may view this as the singular reason for their loss, even if it wasn't. Students suffer, and so do the sportsmanship and camaraderie that high school debate was once known for. It's not just that certain arguments are no longer welcome, it's also the students who make those arguments. At the 2018 NSDA National Tournament in Fort Lauderdale, a student was publicly ridiculed by peers for making conservative arguments. She later posted a, quote, open letter from a deplorable S-bag on Reddit, which read, quote, to the judges and students wearing the F Trump t-shirts, tears stream down my face as I write this. I've never felt so hurt in my entire life. I really did not appreciate your words toward me after the round. I didn't appreciate the spectators/competitors wearing shirts with matching sentiment with you following me to my next rounds. I understand I speak fast sometimes and that I often unknowingly use words that offend certain groups of people. Also, I'm sorry that my attire didn't fit your standards. I know about the stain on my shirt, but it is really all I had. There's more coming up here, a little bit more about this story. You can share your thoughts on the status of political correctness. Very few people would disagree with the fact that anything not prohibited by the U.S. Constitution is certainly legal. Even if the U.S. Constitution were a contract, we could simply point to the countless examples over the past century of the federal government violating the Constitution with increasing severity. And we know that the most fundamental tenet of contract law is severability, the concept that if one party violates a contract with willful intent and does not immediately correct the violation, the other party is totally within its rights to void the entire contract. Once the federal government passed the massive National Firearms Act, which clearly violated the Constitution's Second Amendment protection of the right to keep and bear arms without infringement, any state could have walked away from the Union with good reason, according to universal contract law. You can learn more about how we can peacefully divorce D.C. at NHindependence.org and join the movement at NHexit.us.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree a deal. Both sides say progress is being made, but most lawmakers have left Washington for the three-day holiday weekend, with key negotiators staying to try and hash out a deal. Democrats and Republicans are trying to agree to an increase to the country's borrowing limit before June the 1st, when the US is expected to default on its debts. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. Jessica Watkins was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. On Thursday, the militia's founder Stuart Rhodes received an 18-year sentence, the toughest handed down so far. A senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. Florida's governor used a live streaming function on Twitter to make his public announcement. FSN's William Denslow reports from New York.
Taking to the social media platform, Fouad Dabiri said he was leaving Twitter after nearly 4 incredible years with the company. No reason was given for why the senior engineer was leaving, but it comes in the wake of Ron DeSantis' glitch-riddled presidential campaign launch. The event was held on Twitter Spaces, an audio-only live streaming platform on the social media site. Technical difficulties forced DeSantis to wait for over 20 minutes before he could make his address. Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have faced blowback for the glitches. But Dabiri says it was enlightening to see how Musk's principles and vision are shaping the company.
An Indiana doctor has been reprimanded in order to pay a fine of some $3,000 for violating a young patient's privacy. Dr. Caitlin Bernard performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio and later spoke about it on television. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II faced a potential assassination threat in the 1980s, according to documents released by the FBI. The documents show that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was concerned about threats from the IRA ahead of the late Queen's trip to the United States. FSN's Sally Patterson reports.
Newly released files outline preparations for Queen Elizabeth's trips to the United States, including an official tour of the West Coast in 1983. An assassination threat was made to a police officer in San Francisco, where a man said he was seeking revenge for his daughter, who had been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. In response, the Secret Service planned to implement extra safety measures, but no details of arrests were published in the FBI files. The late Queen, who died last September, aged 96, frequently travelled during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
This is Free Talk Live, and you can join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian and Chris. You can join us online, of course, over at freetalklive.com. And I want to let you know and send thanks out to Jared Hofker, who is a gold level supporter of our AMPS program. Gold meaning that Jared is contributing $10 a month to AMPS. AMPS stands for Advertise, Market, Promote, and Support. It's a way for you to get behind what we do here on Free Talk Live. And what we do, of course, is spread the ideas of freedom, liberty, peace, cryptocurrency, alternatives to the violent status quo that we have today. If you like what we're doing, then join Jared over there at amps.freetalklive.com. That's amps.freetalklive.com. We got an update on the the library case, lbry.com, that just came out via the Pacer government court system. We can give you a brief update on that coming up here in a little bit. And, of course, your calls and thoughts are welcome. But, again, if you want to back the show up for as little as $5 a month, and Jared's doing 10, so definitely appreciate the support, you can go to amps.freetalklive.com, and you can support us via debit card, credit card, or PayPal through amps.freetalklive.com. That takes you over to our Patreon. Now, let's say you don't care for Patreon. Well, we have another option for you. You can join the Odyssey channel as a supporter there. Just go to video.freetalklive.com and click the join button there at the top. And we're going to talk more about Odyssey in regards to what might happen to library, or what is going to happen. Just the details haven't quite been hammered out yet in what is the equivalent of a sentencing procedure, but it's not criminal, so it's some other term in civil law. Anyway, we can get into that. But what we've been talking about here is the sort of the death of the National Debating Organization. This is known as the National Speech and Debate Association. Very interesting, revealing story by The Free Press at thefp.com. Gentleman writing the story has a lot of debating experience. His name is James Fishback, and he's won a bunch of debates, made it to nationals, did fairly well. And he's talking about this website where debate judges post what they call paradigms. And the website is called Tabroom, TABROOM.com. And so if you're in this debating organization as a high school senior or whatever your age is, and you're going to a debate, what your topic is, you can go and look up the judge that's going to be judging your debate on this website. And it's apparently an official site maintained by the NSDA. And the judges there post their paradigms, which explain what they look for during a debate. And what we've learned in this story here is that some of these judges are just straight up saying to you, and I don't know if you have any way of challenging this as a debater. I would hope that there's some way to do it. But they're just straight up saying, yeah, if you offend me, if your viewpoints are not matching my political viewpoints, if you're not a Maoist Marxist, then you are going to lose the debate. Or if you try to position your arguments as someone who has a different color of skin would, you will lose the debate, is what one of these other judges had to say. And it's just pretty outrageous. But going on here, he says, during my time as a coach, I saw many students lose interest and quit. They'd had enough of being told what they could and couldn't say. A black student that I coached was told by a debate judge that he would have won his round if he hadn't condemned Black Lives Matter. This is a black student who was told this. In 2019, I gave up on the NSDA and formed a new debate league. He calls it Incubate Debate. Their website, incubatedebate.org. To judge debates, we recruit elected officials, members of the armed forces, business executives, faith-based leaders, and others. At the 18 no-cost tournaments we've hosted this year, thousands of students have come together to debate, have fun, and learn from each other. And good for him. I think that is a good solution here, right? Rather than trying
competition.
Rather than trying to change the old organization, this old broken, almost 100-year-old, now 98-year-old organization from the inside, like, oh, well, we got to get elected to the board, and then we got to change the paradigms from the inside. No, he just went ahead and did the right thing, which is to create his own competing organization. And I don't know, if they're perfectly principled. I haven't looked at it in any kind of detail, but it's another alternative. It's another option for people to decide to join, and I think that's the right way to do it. You build the alternatives rather than trying to take down the existing status quo. He says, finally, think back to that high school sophomore who's nervously pacing before an NSDA debate. Before she enters her round, she reads her judge's paradigm and says to herself, I'm going to lose. Her loss won't be because her argument lacked evidence or support. Her argument simply doesn't conform to her judge's ideology. Imagine her disappointment and hopelessness. Imagine her weeks of research and rehearsal. She never had a shot. So if you want to join the show here, the number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Now, of course, there are some people in the liberty movement who are, they make a similar argument of we need to build the alternatives, and I don't disagree with that. However, the difference, of course, in what we're doing here in New Hampshire and with this National Debate Organization is the National Debating Organization is a voluntary association, right? So you don't have to be associated with it. You're not forced to fund their system. You can simply step away from it. You can join this other guy's thing. You can form your own system if you want to, your own debating club, and do it the way you want. So there's not coercion involved like there is, of course, with the state. And so as much as I like the idea of, what do they call it? Agorists, right? Agorism, sort of working outside of the system to create an alternative economy. And I think that's all great. I really do. And I support it as much as I possibly can, right? So, we bought some meat from J Noon here. It's in the house. It's delicious. I didn't have to go through any sort of government process or whatever. And there's a lot of this community here in New Hampshire where people are buying and selling things from other people within the community, there is this sort of agorism going on. That's likely not being reported to governments in any way, shape, or form. Right?
That's for sure.
Yeah. So I do support that, and I think it is important. But unfortunately, we still have to change the system. And I wish we didn't. I wish that we could just ignore it and have it just go away. But unfortunately, they will not be ignored. These people, these psychopaths who want to rule over your life, they have men with guns, they have cages, they've got vans, they've got handcuffs, they've got all the things they need, they've got bombs that they will use to enforce their beliefs on you.
And they will drop them on you, an American even.
They have, and
Yep.
they've done it in the past. And they will do it again, and they'll make whatever excuse they need to make, and most people will look the other way, or they'll just say, oh, it's just a few bad apples, and they'll have all the excuses they're going to have. So as much as I want to just build out of this, I don't think it's possible to simply go that one direction. There's still too many people who are caught up in the statist paradigm, the paradigm that it's okay to use violence against their neighbors, even though they don't see it that way, right? Like when they think about the state, the average person doesn't think about the violence inherent in the system. They just think, well, that's just the way it is. We have to pay taxes. It's the cost of doing business. It's the
cost of living in a free
cost
society.
of living in a civilized society, blah, blah, blah. So we hear a lot of these excuses. And that's why, of course, gathering people together is necessary. That's why the Free State Project is such an important concept, to encourage people who already have our beliefs in individual liberty and peace to come to the same geographic area. But the reality is there's still not enough of us.
Nope.
I mean, we're not going to get 100% of libertarians to move to New Hampshire. That's unrealistic. If we could get 5%, I think that would be a tremendous success story.
The good thing, though, is we don't need 100% of libertarians to move to New Hampshire. We need a percentage of libertarians to move to New Hampshire.
That's why I say 5% would be tremendous.
Yep.
If we could get it. But that's still not enough to win an election. That's still not enough, to dominate the New Hampshire political scene. That's just enough to bring enough activists here to where we can't really be ignored. We we're already having tremendous influence, and they're already
not ignoring us.
We're not being ignored as is. There's groups that have been formed to specifically oppose the Free Staters. There's people who are just absolutely obsessed with the Free Staters, haters who are obsessed with us in relatively high-level positions. So we've been, the liberty activists here in New Hampshire have been acknowledged as a force to be reckoned with. And we're still relatively early on in this whole political migration thing. But I don't think we can just build our way out of it. Do you?
Just build our way out of it? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
there are some people who say, oh, well, don't participate in the system, don't vote.
I think maybe the way you're meaning it, probably not. Obviously, to some degree, I think you can ignore them. And for most people, nothing's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But obviously, if you ignore them in certain areas, like for
when
example,
they flip the blue lights on behind you as you're driving somewhere.
Yeah,
I don't think ignoring them is going to work there.
For example, if you don't pay your property taxes, right?
No,
you
can't ignore those.
You might be able to ignore your income taxes, but if you ignore your property taxes, they're going to come after you.
Oh, yes, they will.
Yeah, so
relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because the paradigm hasn't shifted. And it would be one thing to ignore them if the supermajority of people were on your side. If there was no doubt that your neighbors, 90% of them or 85% of them, saw the government as a criminal enterprise, then I think that would change how this was playing out. I think that you would actually probably be able to ignore them at that point, because if there were, if 80 to 90% of the populace was in agreement with you, then if you went in front of a jury, you'd have no problem winning a case.
There is also the other side of this, right? You don't even necessarily need 90% of people to agree with you. You just need enough people to agree with you doing what you're doing that it overwhelms the system and resisting, right? So I don't know what that number is, but let's say it's 5%, right? Because there's only so many, judges. There's only so much money going into the court system. There's only so much of that.
Yeah, but 5%, you're not guaranteed to get somebody on a jury at 5%.
But you don't necessarily need somebody on a jury. If you had 5%, let's say, you've overwhelmed their system. And if every person, say demands a jury trial, they don't have enough money going to that system to cover it, which would just ultimately end up increasing those costs. And eventually they're going to have to give up, even if they can go after, a certain percentage of us.
No, I get what you're saying as far as overwhelm the system argument.
I'm not saying it's necessarily a successful strategic move. I'm simply saying, in theory, you might be able to go down that path, and it might.
Right, but you're still going to have people going to prison in that case.
Right. So, but there's always going to be people going to prison because they're always looking to make examples out of people.
No, I understand that, but what I was talking about, Chris, was the idea that we can ignore changing the system. Okay, so there's people who say that don't vote, don't work within the system, stay outside of the system, build the agora, build the alternatives, and then eventually the system will just disappear. And that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
unless you have a super majority.
That's not going to work.
Of the people on your side. I mean, maybe you could get away with a slight majority, like 60% or something like that. You have to have a significant number of the populace who agrees with like voluntarism, anarchism, libertarianism before you're going to actually be able to ignore the system, right? Before you can just have mass civil disobedience, mass non-payment of taxes, all of that stuff, and then have people just ignore the court orders or whatever, you would need to have a significant percentage of the population. And 5% of libertarians moving to New Hampshire ain't going to be that. So given that there's not enough libertarians out there to make something like that happen, we have to persuade people.
Yeah.
We have to.
The argument is it's not the best strategic move, I think, to go down that path.
To build the alternatives, solely build the alternatives.
Yes, yeah,
you mean? Yeah. Like I'm saying,
working within the system, combining that and working within the system.
Yeah, do them both. Why not do both?
Yeah,
right?
solely one thing is probably not going to get you what you want.
And we've seen success with the working in the system. It's tough. It's frustrating. It's slow. It's icky.
Well, and you know what? I mean, I think working outside that system has its benefits too, in some respect. Like, for example, it generates publicity often that you're not going to get from working within the system, which is going to attract more people to New Hampshire, which will then result in there being more people in the system working to solve it, which will get us more results, more practical results.
Yeah, I mean, you and I, we've always, I think, been in favor of just doing whatever can make a difference, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Work in the system, run for office, whatever, do some civil disobedience, do whatever you think is the right thing to do, but don't take down other people for doing the thing that they think is good, right? So if somebody's working within the system, if somebody's voting, they shouldn't be shouted down by the people who are the outside the system people. Because if that's what you want to do, if that's what you want to focus on, fine, by all means. I don't get insulted by people who don't want to vote. I think it's kind of silly.
I think there's a fallacy in even going down that path, in that it's not going to change. Voting could potentially have an impact, right? Whereas not voting will definitely have a negative impact, right? And I'm not sure why you would want to go down a path that is going to be strategically undermining, even if you're not, if you don't necessarily think that it's going to have, a substantial impact, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
If the captain were here, and he's one of our current co-hosts, I believe Captain and Nikki are two anti-voter co-hosts on Free Talk Live. But if he were here, I think that he would say that it is immoral for him to participate in the system, that by voting he would be endorsing the system.
It only be endorsing the system if you were voting for candidates that were against liberty or trying to take away your freedoms.
You would think, but no, their viewpoint is that just simply registering to vote and participating, regardless of who you're voting for, even though you might be voting for all pro-liberty, 100% voluntarist candidates, which you can actually do in New Hampshire, You can only vote for libertarian voluntarist types if you want to. But they would still say that by simply showing up, you are giving your approval to the system.
I don't see how that is.
It's just in their heads.
Yeah, this seems like
it's fantasy.
Yeah, it seems like a fallacy to say that somebody who votes agrees with the system. I can vote and not agree with that system.
Right.
Like, I don't agree with the way the system is, the way the democracy is currently, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to vote just because I disagree with it.
Well, here's the other thing. The system doesn't care whether you vote.
Right.
The system, the people who believe in it, the people who are the true believers in this religious system, which is what it is, really. The government's really just an evil religion that justifies violence against people. But those people don't care if you show up or not. They're going to keep doing what they're doing.
They want you not to show up.
It doesn't matter to them, right? It doesn't matter. They're going to keep doing what they're doing because you're going to pay the tax bill at the end of the day. All these people who say they don't vote, you better believe they're paying the tax bill at the end of the day. And that's where the rubber really meets the road. Let's go to the phones here. Caller, you're on Free Talk Live with Ian and Chris. Go ahead.
Hi, am I on?
You are. What's your name, caller?
My name's Robin.
Robin, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
So I was listening. I'm sorry I haven't been listening tonight because y'all don't broadcast live. We're in my area. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and you guys were talking about kratom.
Yeah.
And there was some discussion about methadone and Suboxone and Subutex, and I happen to be a prescriber of those substances.
Oh, all right.
I work in a rehab facility treating opioid addiction. And I just wanted to correct a few things. The first thing I wanted to say is I don't want people that have an addiction to opioids to be afraid to get on methadone, Suboxone, and Subutex. They are much safer than what's out there, especially since what's out there now isn't even heroin. It's actually fentanyl cut with sugar alcohol. There's not any heroin out there.
Really?
At least in my area, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's testing positive for just fentanyl.
Wow. And where are you calling from?
South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, and so there's no way for them. They'll say they're using a gram a day or something like that, but they're trusting math of these folks cutting the fentanyl into the sugar alcohol. So, frankly, legalization, I'd prefer to deal with heroin and pills than with fentanyl. But the thing about kratom is that I have seen people get addicted to kratom and have a harder time coming off it. They've tried to use it to come off of heroin or fentanyl, as the case may be, and they tend to escalate the doses and keep using more and more and more. Whereas I have seen multiple times success with people coming off of opiates using buprenorphine, which is Subutex and Suboxone, and methadone. They're a lot longer acting than kratom. They're definitely a lot longer acting than fentanyl and heroin. Because they're so long acting, you would have to taper down slowly, and it takes a while. But I have had multiple patients be successful with coming off of them slowly, and they weren't able to get off of the shorter acting opioids. Anyway, it was just driving me crazy.
So let me just make sure I understood what you're saying there, Robin. You're saying in your experience as somebody who is involved in this side of helping people with breaking these addictions, you've seen people try kratom and they haven't had as much success to use kratom to break a harder opiate addiction as you've seen people with using Suboxone, for instance, to break heroin addiction.
And what they end up doing is trying to break the heroin or fentanyl addiction, and they end up addicted to the kratom. They end up there was talk on the podcast the other night about somebody who was using crazy amounts of kratom. Just like any other drug, I think there's certain people that can use drugs without becoming addicted. Certain people who I honestly think have a genetic predisposition to become addicted, and unfortunately, I don't think you know if that's you until it bites you.
Yeah.
But so I'm not for like making stuff illegal. None of my patients have come in looking for recovery because it's illegal. Making stuff illegal doesn't solve the problem. But just at the education part, I have more faith, I guess, because I deal with them every day, in buprenorphine and methadone as ways to get off of opiates than kratom, even though kratom is natural and all that kind of stuff.
Now, I presume you've got to get a doctor's prescription to get the Suboxone, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a nurse practitioner, so I write prescriptions.
You can do that.
And
now, what kind of
yeah.
cost are we talking about? I mean, would the Kratom be a cheaper option for somebody that doesn't want to go to the doctor and go to a pharmacy?
Probably depends on how much you're using.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that the cost would probably be a trade-off if you're a heavy user. There is things like GoodRx that you can use for the prescription drug program. If you have insurance, a lot of times insurance will cover some of this stuff. So if you're a heavy user, of like fentanyl and heroin, the cost it's cheaper to do buprenorphine and methadone. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
But Kratom, I'm not as aware of what the prices are, but my guess would be it's probably a few $100s a month to be on methadone or Suboxone or Subutex. And my guess would be a heavy user would probably be spending a few $100s a month. Someone could probably call in and correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Have you seen any success stories with Kratom?
I personally haven't, but then you have to keep in mind I'm not looking for them per se. When people come in to see me, they're in trouble and looking.
Right, they're already, it hasn't worked. Whatever they've tried hasn't worked. They're coming to see you.
I got a question for you. Yeah. What is the amount of time that it takes to get off of these drugs?
Usually I recommend that you stay on methadone or buprenorphine for 6 to 12 months and get 6 to 12 months of what I would call good, healthy habits and sobriety behind you before you try and get off them, and then take another probably 6 to 12 months to get off it.
Wow.
So it's a long process.
Serious stuff,
but usually by the time people come in to see me, they've got years behind them. And what I hear is not that it's illegal, but I hear I'm tired of it. I'm tired.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your experience tonight, Robin. I really appreciate you calling in and share that.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the call. The number here is 603-283-6160. And if you're listening to a podcast and we're not talking about that topic, you can just bring it up. Bring up whatever you want here on Free Talk Live. The number is 603-283-6160. Coming up, a Swedish VPN raided. We'll tell you about it.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. It's physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com. The new 4th edition of Healing Our World, The Compassion of Libertarianism, will take your understanding of liberty to a deeper level and has over 1,300 updated references, new cartoons, and a foreword by Dr. Ron Paul. With discounts for multiple book purchases, the 4th edition of Healing Our World is a great gift for the liberals, pragmatists, environmentalists, and Christians in your life who think libertarianism is cold-hearted. Get yours today at healing.freetalklive.com and use promo code FTL for a $5 discount. What if you want to hear the latest episode of Free Talk Live, but all you have is your phone, you forgot to download our archive, and you have no data connection? You can call our Listen line at 641-793-0191. That's a long-distance number, so you may incur charges. If not, listen as long as you want. 641-793-0191. The Free Talk Live Listen line, 641-793-0191.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree a deal. Both sides say progress is being made, but most lawmakers have left Washington for the 3-day holiday weekend, with key negotiators staying to try and hash out a deal. Democrats and Republicans are trying to agree to an increase to the country's borrowing limit before June the 1st, when the US is expected to default on its debts. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. Jessica Watkins was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. On Thursday, the militia's founder Stuart Rhodes received an 18-year sentence, the toughest handed down so far. A senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. Florida's governor used a live streaming function on Twitter to make his public announcement. FSN's William Denslow reports from New York.
Taking to the social media platform, Fouad Dabiri said he was leaving Twitter after nearly 4 incredible years with the company. No reason was given for why the senior engineer was leaving, but it comes in the wake of Ron DeSantis' glitch-riddled presidential campaign launch. The event was held on Twitter Spaces, an audio-only live streaming platform on the social media site. Technical difficulties forced DeSantis to wait for over 20 minutes before he could make his address. Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have faced blowback for the glitches. But Dabiri says it was enlightening to see how Musk's principles and vision are shaping the company.
An Indiana doctor has been reprimanded in order to pay a fine of some $3,000 for violating a young patient's privacy. Dr. Caitlin Bernard performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio and later spoke about it on television. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II faced a potential assassination threat in the 1980s, according to documents released by the FBI. The documents show that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was concerned about threats from the IRA ahead of the late Queen's trip to the United States. FSN's Sally Patterson reports.
Newly released files outline preparations for Queen Elizabeth's trips to the United States, including an official tour of the West Coast in 1983. An assassination threat was made to a police officer in San Francisco, where a man said he was seeking revenge for his daughter, who had been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. In response, the Secret Service planned to implement extra safety measures, but no details of arrests were published in the FBI files. The late Queen, who died last September, aged 96, frequently travelled during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, remembering the great Tina Turner, who died on Wednesday at the age of 83. There is so much to say about her. American presidents, fellow musicians, artists and fans have all been paying tribute over the last many hours. The New York Times called her a magnetic singer of explosive power, much of which could be traced back to her explosive relationship with former husband Ike Turner and her recovery from that abusive pairing. In an interview recorded to promote the 1993 film about her life, What's Love Got to Do With It, starring Angela Bassett, Tina Turner credited her spirit and independence to her admiration of former First Lady Jackie Kennedy.
It was what it feels like when you meet an icon, and I'm sure I'm that for a lot of rock people, someone that you have worshipped and watched and mimicked and used as a reference for helping yourself to become a better person, a lady rather than a woman, all of that, you know. When you know you're not a lady, you don't handle yourself in that way. People don't see you as a lady. I always look to try to become a lady, and I think Jackie was a perfect example of a lady.
And so was Tina Turner. She died on Wednesday at her home in Switzerland, an unequalled star on the global stage. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree to a deal. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol, receiving 8.5 years in prison. And a senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
This is The Onion Week in Review. In a landmark 5-4 decision issued this Wednesday, the Supreme Court ruled to allow Americans to cram cash directly into politicians' mouths. The ruling, which effectively eradicates former prohibitions against stuffing checks and stacks of $100 bills straight down the throats, ears, and other orifices of presidential and congressional candidates, is expected to fundamentally alter the ways American politicians have large quantities of money shoved right into their bodies.
In football music news this week, the 1985 Chicago Bears reunite to record their first new material since the Super Bowl Shuffle. The group says the new material will be darker and more introspective than its Shuffle-era work.
And in this week's op-ed pages, a man asks why, if God exists, doesn't he throw us like a really sweet party? In other news, an increasing number of men feel pressured to accept realistic standards of female beauty. FedEx confirms that more than 600,000 people try to mail themselves each year. And a recovering alcoholic doesn't need friends to have a good time.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. We're kicking off the second hour of the program here. The number, if you want to join us, 603-283-6160. 603-283-6160. Here tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
You can join Chris on his show. It's called Freedom Decrypted. He does it weekly on Saturdays, about 5 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. On video, audio, both available through freedomdecrypted.com. Chris, what is the show?
It's a tech show for prickly people. So we basically cover a lot of the same kind of stuff that we cover on Free Talk Live, actually, except with a tech slant to it.
Yeah, you get a little more deeper into the weeds, and you definitely bring up some stories that we probably wouldn't cover here just because it's too technical.
So yeah, definitely.
If you like tech,
there's definitely more Linux and free software kind of stuff, and just anything that involves like like a government, attacking liberty or freedom in some way, we'll cover.
Which they're always doing, as far as especially as tech is concerned. We could talk about the library case here in a little bit.
Yep.
But there's a story you've been wanting to share over the past couple of weeks. We just haven't had a chance to get to it. And that is out of Europe, Sweden, apparently. A Swedish VPN, which I know they've been raided. We'll talk about that. But I know that when I hear about Sweden, I think, aren't they one of the more privacy-friendly countries? Aren't they like if you're a VPN user, don't they say, oh, you should use a Swedish VPN or a Swedish exit point? Because
they might be. I think Iceland is the one you're probably thinking of.
Because I thought there's certain European countries.
Iceland, maybe Switzerland.
Maybe it was Switzerland. I always get those two confused.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about Sweden as much, but I mean, it might be one of them. But
yeah, maybe it was Switzerland. There's certain countries in Europe that are sort of known for having the best privacy protections, as far as if you download some movie from the Pirate Bay, the Switzerland or the Swiss government isn't going to come after you or whatever. They don't care, essentially. This is not legal advice. Obviously, I don't remember which countries they are. But
Sweden might have been one in there at
do
some
your own
point
research.
too. There may have also been rulings that have come out that, this is the thing. Often, countries are good until they're not.
Meaning, and you never know when that's going to change, right?
The entertainment industry goes and brings a lawsuit or something along those lines, and then all of a sudden they're not so good anymore because they've gotten themselves a ruling that undermines privacy and security basically for everyone, unfortunately.
So what happened?
So in this case, this is a super interesting story, and by the way, this is coming from The Verge.
Okay.
It's involving a VPN provider called Mullvad, and they're actually a pretty popular VPN provider too. And basically, the police tried to raid its offices, but couldn't find any user data. And this is important because this is what you want when it comes from a VPN provider.
Because there's some of them that claim they don't log your data, but how do you really know what they're doing?
And the thing is, it's often the case that VPN providers are lying about these things. And the reason, in part, they're telling myths, they're half-truths, right? So there's something called a session log. It's essential for like providing VPN services. And all it is while you're connected to the VPN, obviously they know who you are, right? So if, say,
you have an account.
Yeah,
presumably.
you have an account, right?
They know what your IP address is.
Well, so you have, usually when we're talking about VPN providers in this type of scenario, we're talking about a shared IP. So the question is, are they logging what websites that particular account is going to?
Mhm.
That's the question. And if
you
they're
basically
not,
have to trust them.
right? If they're, when they say no logging, they're not doing that. But they're talking about writing an actual log file to like a hard disk or something along those lines. All right. But session logs aren't that. They're just in memory temporarily while you're connected to the VPN. If say, for example, Mullvad was raided while you were connecting to the Mullvad VPN, well, they could take a look, they could bring up a log on the screen, the session log, and they could see that you're connected to some,
They can see what's happening in the moment.
Right. In the moment. Exactly. So that's why I say it's a little bit of a half truth when companies say, VPN providers say they're not logging. Sort of, it's true, but obviously for the internet to work, yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to know where a person's going,
Right.
so you can get them there, right?
Yep. So, but what this does tell me is that they're not permanent. They're not making any permanent logs, I think is what this is basically,
This was called Mullvad?
Mullvad.
M-O-L?
It's M-U-L-L-V-A-D. Mullvad.
M-U-L-L-V-A-D. Okay.
Yep. And they are one of the providers that I have recommended. I feel like they've done things right.
This would be besides your own provider, which is called
so we have I also
Penguin
offer Penguin VPN service through thinkpenguin.com. But one of the things that Mullvad does right is how they set up their WireGuard VPN service, which is basically a WireGuard is the protocol basically. And a lot of VPN providers are requiring you to install proprietary software that you can't trust.
Ooh, that's not good.
And that could potentially undermine whatever security you have on your system. And Mullvad doesn't do that. There's a couple of others that there's a handful that don't, but it's one of those things where if they're making you use proprietary software,
which is not open source by
right,
definition,
especially when there's not any source code to it, right? That's potentially problematic. Mullvad, OVPN, I think. I'm trying to think of some of the others, but there's not that many of them. Basically, is what it comes down to. And so this is another good indicator that they're doing something right. So here, let's get into the story here. So Mullvad, the Swedish company behind Mullvad VPN, says police walked away with nothing after attempting to seize computers from its office.
Attempting to seize.
What's entertaining about this though is that they would raid the office because that's not presumably where the VPN servers are. So I have to wonder if this was just incompetence on the law enforcement side, or the law enforcement didn't really care, or
that's a good question.
Because it doesn't necessarily prove that they weren't logging. It's just they walked away after a raid, having maybe raided the wrong address. I mean, if you think about it, Mullvad has VPN servers all over the world.
Yeah.
So why would you raid the office?
I don't know. They probably figured you could still log in remotely. Right?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Get access to whatever they need to get access to. But what's interesting is they claim they walked away empty-handed. I mean,
meaning they didn't even seize the servers in the first place. So how would they know, other than the fact that they trusted Mullvad?
I don't know. I presume they got in and looked around themselves, but let's see what else they have to say.
As reported earlier by PC Mag, according to an update, well, and the thing is, like, if you understand how law enforcement works, they're not going to look at the computer. Well, they might look at the computers while they're there, what's on screen.
They did here.
But they're not necessarily going to go through the computers on site, generally speaking. That's what they would call a live forensics investigation.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that they're not going to do that is, well, one, it's time consuming, but the reason, besides, I mean, that's one of the reasons they're not going to do it on site. But what they will do is they'll take a picture of whatever's on the screen. And one of the parts of like a forensics investigation is logging every little thing that you do. So generally what's going to happen is they're going to pull the power, and then they're going to take it back to a lab and analyze.
That's why I'm surprised here. I mean, it wasn't a forensics investigation. They were looking for something else. Right, and they didn't find that,
which is interesting because you would think they would have just done a subpoena, not performed a raid on the company.
Yeah, but raiding a company is a punitive act, right?
Yes.
Where
it's the company that's
bad.
doing something illegal, not a user of the company.
Well, was it?
Well, let's keep going.
Well, I presume they were looking for information about certain users, but yeah,
I presume so
what's
too.
The reason here,
according to an update on the Molvad site, the authorities left and didn't take anything after it informed them that the company doesn't store customer data.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds like they took their word for it.
It sounds like it. We argued they had no reason to expect to find what they were looking for, and any seizures would therefore be illegal under Swedish law.
Okay.
Generally, they're not going to believe the person that they're raiding, so kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Molvad writes, after demonstrating that this is indeed how our service...
Now, imagine if you could just talk
your way out of it.
Like, yeah, you guys, this isn't going to work out for you. Nice day.
Indeed, how our service works, and them consulting the prosecutor, they left without taking anything and without any customer information. So one of the things is
they could have just called them and asked.
I suspect the reason it went down the way it did, if this is in fact what happened, I suspect comes down to the fact that I think I read this article before. They were doing it on behalf, the Swedish law enforcement were doing it on behalf of the German law enforcement.
Oh.
And they probably sort of went in blind to do the raid. And then after talking with the, people there, they realized that it wasn't going to do any good, and the prosecutor probably didn't really care because it's not the prosecutor's case, it's a German law enforcement's case.
Yeah, that's an interesting distinction here, because if it was their own case, maybe they would have been a little more rough with the people. Maybe they would have taken stuff. Maybe they would have not apologized or not listened to what was being said. Whereas in this case, they're like, oh, well, yeah, if we seize all this stuff, we're just going to have to hold it somewhere and then probably give it back, and that's going to be a big hassle, so we'll just leave it here.
There's no benefit, basically, for them, and there's only negatives. So
right, they don't get the conviction. They don't get
they're not prosecuting the company anyway. It's the data. I wonder if they even knew it was a VPN provider when they went in and raided.
Jeez.
I don't know. You'd think that they would do a little bit more research than that, but we've seen some pretty incompetent things from law enforcement in the U.S. at least.
For sure.
So a VPN is a service that lets you securely browse the internet using an encrypted connection to a private server. It hides...
virtual private network.
Yeah, that's kind of weird saying a private server, but okay. I mean, it is, I guess. It hides identifying information such as your IP address. What it is it's a shared server is what you're using, really, because it's... You're connecting to VPN's, I guess, private server, but it's that server is being shared amongst all the users of, there's more than one, but all the users of the service, and they're using, multiple users on one IP address.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So
I always wondered how many IPs these guys.
It's going to be more than one.
Yeah.
But no, you're going to, generally speaking, unless you have a static IP address, but then it's going to be. It's a little bit of a different setup, but generally,
wait, do they put users on the same IP at the same time?
Yes.
Or is it just okay?
Yes, and that's how come without those logs, you don't necessarily know what user, did what thing that somebody, if there's law enforcement or copyright cartels or whoever it is wants it, they need those logs.
That's why sometimes when you're on a VPN and you go to certain websites, they'll say, oh, well, this IP has been restricted due to blah, 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 or whatever. Somebody else was trying to spam or whatever else they were trying to do from that IP. It wasn't you, but it was somebody else on the same VPN who was doing something they shouldn't have been doing, and so you get punished for it because you're on the same IP.
It's actually amazing that they even do that, because there's all sorts of, VPNs are just one technology, but lots of companies have what are called proxy servers, and the point isn't to anonymize anybody, and often the proxy servers will actually send along another IP address of the user, but the point is there's many situations where you may have one IP address for many users. So to block an IP address is going to affect more than just a single user.
Right.
You might be affecting, hundreds of users or thousands of users even.
Sure.
There's whole countries behind a single proxy server in some instances.
Wow.
So yeah, it's actually kind of amazing that security policies are such at many websites to basically block huge swaths of the internet.
I mean, it's an extreme thing to do, but sometimes blocking an IP is the only way you can stop somebody from coming into your system, right?
Yeah, and often they block whole IP ranges in many cases too.
Right,
so
they could just
it's like
get a new IP.
We're going to block all of New Hampshire because there's one person in New Hampshire.
Yeah,
it's crazy, but that's really how it works in many cases. Or whole countries or whole continents are sometimes blocked.
Because there's more. There's certain likelihood that you're going to have a hacker coming from that part of the country or that part of the world. So they just say, you know what, we'd just rather not have anyone from that country.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a situation where like a company only does business in the United States, so they're just going to block all of China or all of Asia or all of Africa, right? Yeah. Because they don't do business with Africa or China or Asia or any of those countries or continents. So
just lock them out.
It doesn't have as much of an negative effect, but
right.
It hides identifying information, such as your IP address, from third parties, making it possible to access geo-blocked websites or get a more private browsing experience. Something else to point out, an IP address is sort of like your home address. You can sort of think of it like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean your home address. It could be like an apartment building, not necessarily your physical address.
Right.
Unlike many other VPN services, Mullvad doesn't require an email address to sign up, and instead it generates a random account number for all users.
Wow, that is unusual.
Yeah, I mean, how useful that is, it's sort of somewhat debatable, but certainly not having an email address or a phone number or other information tied to your to an account
more
is definitely the way to go. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this, and if they're not the only provider like this.
So their viewpoint is that, look, we don't need to know your email address for verification purposes because you're going to have to pay for the service. So as long as you can pay for the service, we don't care if you have an email on file, right?
Yeah. There's also other ways to sort of deal with the problem, like, for example, not keeping databases of account information alongside the billing information.
Okay.
So if you separate the two. So until somebody gives you the information for their account, you can't renew both pieces of information. You can't renew the subscription.
I see.
Mullvad says this is the first time in its 14 years of operating a VPN that police have issued a search warrant. And company CEO Jan Johnson tells The Verge he doesn't know exactly what they were looking for.
Interesting.
Even if I wonder if the Swedish authorities even knew what they were looking for.
Doesn't sound
because
like it.
It's on behalf of the German authorities. But I mean, you think they must, but who knows?
Yeah, that's interesting. They don't even know.
Yeah. Even if the authorities had seized its servers, Johnson says that police wouldn't have found anything due to its strict policies against keeping data. In a statement to The Verge, Christian...
Good for them, by the way. And there's another good reason to do this beyond just trying to help your customers protect their privacy. Another good reason is if you don't have the data, you can't turn it over, and that means that whatever stupid requests that the government's going to make, they're going to issue subpoenas to you saying, give us all the blah, blah. Sorry, I don't have anything to give you.
Yep.
So that's a time saver, right? Because otherwise, if you have the data, then you got to have an employee go on the task of digging up the information, printing it out, and then sending it, whatever stupid nonsense you have to do to jump through those hoops. If you don't have the data, you just quick little letter. Sorry, we don't have that. Have a nice day. Time saved, money saved.
It really is. And what's interesting is that there was a Data Regulation Act actually at one point in Europe. And I think it got overturned, if I recall. And basically that required providers like VPN providers and ISPs to log your traffic. So kind of interesting note because that's no longer the case. Christian, a spokesman for the Sweden's National Operations Department, says that members of the Swedish Cybercrime Center operating under the Swedish Police Authority executed the search warrant in response to a European investigation order concerning a serious cybercrime. So it doesn't say Germany here, but I think it was Germany that it was on behalf of. Declined to comment any further, citing local legislation and the fact that this isn't a Swedish investigation. We find it peculiar that the National Operations Department of the Swedish Police make this search warrant visit now for the first time in our 14-year history, Johnson tells The Verge. they should know by now how our service works. Yeah, and what's interesting is that
you would think that in sometime in the last 14 years that a letter would have been sent to them requesting information, and they would have declined it because they don't have the information. They would have learned that.
It's kind of a bigger thing. Like this is the thing with governments, law enforcement, and judges, lawyers, is that they assume that the internet works a certain way, and their understanding of how the internet works is actually flawed because they think like an IP address is a person, right? And it's not a person. It's not even a household. An IP address is just it's a means of routing data. And in many countries, as I pointed out earlier, you might have a whole country behind a single IP address. It's
crazy.
So, this assumption that they make in many cases when it comes to, issuing warrants and things of that nature, it's entirely flawed.
I want to go to the phones here. We can continue with the story. Sam is on the line in Ohio. Go ahead, Sam.
Just curious if we had any news about the debt ceiling.
Supposedly, rumor has it there's a handshake deal. It will be barely any kind of cut to spending, likely, and they will, of course, raise the debt limit. So, I mean, those rumors.
But
I don't know.
Is it going to be the whole scam? We negotiated it for 3 months, and we're going to renegotiate it again.
I mean, of course, there's always going to be another debt ceiling. So when they raise it, there'll be a new ceiling, and then once they reach that or get close to that new ceiling, there'll be more negotiations. They'll act like they're not going to do it, and then they'll come to an agreement at the down to the wire.
Is there any news behind that handshake deal of like how long people think that'll last before we have to go through this whole hand-wringing circus again?
I don't know. I think that everything is still up in the air to some extent. I'm just kind of scanning through one of the stories about this right now as you ask the question, but it's not, it's not all written down. I don't think at this point. I can't really say, Sam. I wish I had more for you, but rest assured, these people will continue the operation of the federal government because that is in both of their interests, which is to say, to control you and to rule you and to violently extract obedience and money from you and value from you. So, I mean, they will find a way to keep this thing moving forward. Just the only thing that we don't know right now are the details.
Oh. And then the other thing I was thinking about, banking problems. Anything news on that?
No, I haven't heard any banks failing in recent days or the last couple of weeks. I'm sure if we'd heard something, we would have brought that to you, Sam. Anything else?
Well, no, not that I can think of. Just the fact that seems like Rome is burning.
Thank you for the call tonight. I appreciate hearing from you. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. If there's any kind of news about that and you want to share it, maybe we haven't heard it yet, you're welcome to join the show. 603-283-6160. I was trying to remember what Peter St. Onge's video was about today. Really enjoy his content. If you want to follow kind of the latest on what's going on with the U.S. economy, then he's definitely the guy to follow on social media. Professor Peter St. Onge, I believe his Twitter account is Prof. St. Onge, does a great little 4 minute long summary of sort of the last 24 hours events. Guy does it 7 days a week, as a matter of fact. So appreciate his dedication. Appreciate his dedication to that. And he's also got a podcast out now, so you can, like, once a week, he combines all of his 3-4 minute things together into one MP3 file and shoots that out. So check him out. All right, there's more coming up here in moments. You can join the show. It's Free Talk Live.
If you're looking for work, it's a process of elimination, and you're trying not to be eliminated. So here's a tip for making the cut, and this might seem subtle, but to the person interviewing you, it's not. There is a world of difference between applicants who convey, "I need a job," and those who simply ooze, "I want to to work, especially in these lean times when many you're competing with will seem desperate in I'll take anything mode. If you convey specific interest in this job at this company, you will be conspicuous. Thus, the value of going to school on the company you're applying to before the interview. With money and attention so tight now, effective communication skills have never been more important. For more tips for job seekers and everyone else, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree a deal. Both sides say progress is being made, but most lawmakers have left Washington for the three-day holiday weekend, with key negotiators staying to try and hash out a deal. Democrats and Republicans are trying to agree to an increase to the country's borrowing limit before June the 1st, when the US is expected to default on its debts. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. Jessica Watkins was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. On Thursday, the militia's founder, Stuart Rhodes, received an 18-year sentence, the toughest handed down so far. A senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. Florida's governor used a live streaming function on Twitter to make his public announcement. FSN's William Denslow reports from New York.
Taking to the social media platform, Fouad Dabiri said he was leaving Twitter after nearly 4 incredible years with the company. No reason was given for why the senior engineer was leaving, but it comes in the wake of Ron DeSantis' glitch-riddled presidential campaign launch. The event was held on Twitter Spaces, an audio-only live streaming platform on the social media site. Technical difficulties forced DeSantis to wait for over 20 minutes before he could make his address. Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have faced blowback for the glitches. But Dabiri says it was enlightening to see how Musk's principles and vision are shaping the company.
An Indiana doctor has been reprimanded in order to pay a fine of some $3,000 for violating a young patient's privacy. Dr. Caitlin Bernard performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio and later spoke about it on television. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II faced a potential assassination threat in the 1980s, according to documents released by the FBI. The documents show that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was concerned about threats from the IRA ahead of the late Queen's trip to the United States. FSN's Sally Patterson reports.
Newly released files outline preparations for Queen Elizabeth's trips to the United States, including an official tour of the West Coast in 1983. An assassination threat was made to a police officer in San Francisco, where a man said he was seeking revenge for his daughter, who had been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. In response, the Secret Service planned to implement extra safety measures, but no details of arrests were published in the FBI files. The late Queen, who died last September, aged 96, frequently travelled during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live. Phones are open here. You can join the show. The number is 603-283-6160. We got the latest court filing in the library case, something we've been following pretty closely here on Free Talk Live in the last couple of years. LBRY.com. We'll get into that story coming up here in a moment. We've been talking about privacy on the internet and this VPN over in Sweden that was actually raided by the Swedish police. Cops went away empty-handed after they realized that this particular VPN didn't store any logs, so there wasn't any data for the cops to take. It's Ian and Chris in the studio here tonight. You can join us online, of course, over at freetalklive.com and enjoy the various different features that we have for you. And I also want you to know that this hour of Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending, and in addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have what is called a decentralized autonomous organization. They did it first. They paved the way for what is now a fairly popular concept. These DAOs, as they're called, are very, very ubiquitous in the crypto scene. In the case of Dash, every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury, and then anybody that's got one Dash, which right now is just above $40 for one Dash, they can put forward a proposal to the what are called the Dash masternodes. Now, masternodes are people that are running a certain program that helps the Dash network do specific tasks, and they get rewarded for that. But they also have to, pay to run the nodes. And so the Dash masternodes get a vote on these proposals. They vet the proposals. They decide which ones move forward and get funded by that 10% treasury. In fact, that's how we got this sponsorship. And again, DAOs are very, very popular now. Dash paved the way by doing it first nearly a decade ago, and it's still going strong. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get and to use Dash. You can start by learning more at Dash.org. And big thanks to the Dash Decentralized Autonomous Organization for sending us 32 Dash per month to promote Dash on the air here on Free Talk Live. You can visit Dash.org to learn about Dash. That is Dash.org. Let's go to the phones here, and then we can talk a little bit more about Sweden, because my memory was that Sweden was pretty privacy-friendly, and according to the story I've got here, that may still be true. But Alu Axelman is on the line with us here from LibertyBlock.com. Hello, Alu.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I'm listening to the show from last night with you and Jay, which is always fantastic, and Jay made some good points about credit cards versus cash. I obviously agree that cash allows for more freedom, privacy, anonymity, and independence. You mentioned that with credit cards, the big banks or whoever supplies the credit cards finds value in it because they can harvest that data. I don't know exactly how much data they get, but I'll tell you one creepy story that I discovered started happening 3, 4, or 5 years ago. I paid with a credit card at some random store. I think I was in Carolina visiting my brother, a store I've never been to, and I got an email receipt. And I remember thinking, wow, that's a little disturbing. How is my email connected to my credit card?
So you didn't give the store your email address, but they emailed you a receipt.
Nope, exactly. And it wasn't like just an email like from Chase. It was like an email like from whatever, North Carolina Bagels. Like,
whoa. And you had never been to this store before?
No.
Okay.
So let me speculate here. I bet what they did was there's a database where they're logging a hash of the credit card number, and then they're assigning that an email address, and then another store, may not even be the same chain, is using...
They're tied into the same
They're hashing
database.
that credit card number, looking up the hash, and pulling the email address to be able to send you an email even though you didn't provide it.
Uh-oh. We lost that sentence there, Alu. Can you say that again?
Sorry. Yeah, the other thing is during the January 6th Fed intervention, Bank of America volunteered. They weren't even after.
Unfortunately, you're in a pretty bad cell there. You're saying something about Bank of America regarding January 6th. One more shot.
Yeah, Bank of America voluntarily gave a lot of the data to the feds around the January.
Oh, yeah. Of course they did.
Any customer who was buying anything from a gun store or was in the D.C. area within that entire time frame, they gave to the feds so that they could target them.
Without a warrant. You're just saying they just said, we're going to help you.
They voluntarily gave it, I believe.
This is exactly why people should be using things like cryptocurrencies, because they give you an opportunity to put a distance between yourself and potentially other malicious actors that want to use your information against you,
like the banks and governments.
Yeah,
it's a great point. Disturbing story, Alu. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I spoke to Aaron Day today, and he's running for president. He's a great free stater, great longtime liberty activist. And he's writing a book. It's coming out very soon. I believe it's called Countdown. It's going to be all about all of this stuff and how we can avoid mass tyranny. And he focuses a lot on CBDCs, crypto, privacy, real money, ending the Fed, bank runs. So that book's going to be fantastic. So everyone should pick it up once that comes out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I know Aaron reached out to me as well, and I think he's going to send a PDF over so we can check it out and then have him on to talk about it. So look forward to that.
And in other news, we just hit publish on 2 of my audiobooks, both recorded by 2 different voluntarists, narrators, Articles of Secession and Blueprint for Liberty. So that'll be 3 audiobooks finally up online.
Excellent. And people can go to learn more about those at libertyblock.com?
Yes, sir, and autoaxelman.com and Amazon.
Very cool. I appreciate your call tonight, man. Thanks for dialing in.
Thanks so much.
Olu Axelman from libertyblock.com. Great independence activist here in New Hampshire as well. Should be
one of the best.
Yeah, for sure. Should be an interesting weekend for independence here in New Hampshire. There's going to be a plane flying over the most populated cities in New Hampshire tomorrow at some point. I don't have the exact schedules. I don't know when people will be able to look to the sky, but if you're in Nashua, Manchester, or Concord, New Hampshire tomorrow, you should see some kind of little plane flying around with a lengthy banner attached to it that will be all about peaceful secession. So we will see. I'm looking forward to hopefully somebody can get a good picture of this thing. They got a good camera to get that shot. That would be great. We'll tell you more about that tomorrow. We'll see how it goes.
Keene was not one of the cities, correct?
Keene is not one of the top
I didn't think
populated
so, unfortunately.
cities. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna spend $500 an hour.
No. I totally understand why. I'm just like, I'm just thinking like, is there any way I could get out there and get a picture?
No.
But it's going to be like an hour minimum each way.
Need to be in the
It'd be a
big
challenge.
Cities. So we were talking about security. We're talking about VPNs, and you had shared a story about a Swedish VPN called Mullvad. They were raided by the Swedish police. The police had to walk away because Mullvad does not log their customers' actions, and they have no logs to turn over to the police. So when the cops came in with whatever weapons they had to walk out without any computers or any data because the data didn't exist. And it made me wonder about, was Sweden one of these privacy protecting countries? That was what was in my head. You said maybe it was Switzerland, and maybe it is also Switzerland, but according to another competing...
I think Iceland is one of the big ones, if I recall.
Could
Switzerland might be too, but I'm not sure. Switzerland is definitely, or was in the past, when it came to secret bank accounts, and so
they
that's
changed that, though.
Yeah, that's not so much the case anymore, but I'm not sure about the privacy as far as the data, but I think they also may be that too.
So now this, just to be clear, this article is a little old. It's from 2016. So what has changed in the last several years, I don't know. But at the very least, this does give you the impression that Sweden is a fairly privacy-centric place compared to other governments in the world. This is actually coming from another VPN competitor's website, which is ExpressVPN, which is not an advertiser. I just looking for information about Swedish privacy, and this is what came up. It says Sweden has a long history of privacy laws. As early as 1973, it became the first country in the world to enact a comprehensive statute that protects the privacy of personal data on computers. Sweden's commitment to privacy is so enshrined that when the EU passed a 2006 data retention directive,
that's what I was talking about.
The Swedish government decided not to play ball. The directive required EU states to ensure that all national internet service providers retain logs of their customers for their purposes of quote-unquote investigation and prosecution. This data was required to be kept for a minimum of 6 months, and the mass harvesting was to begin no later than September 15th, 2007. Fast forward to 2010, and after 3 years of feet-dragging, Sweden was taken to court by the European Commission because they had yet to implement the directive. The European Commission sought a fine for every day that Sweden had not had the law in place. Obviously, the court action was a kick up the backside, and the Swedish government has towed the line ever since. Just kidding, says the author here. Of course they haven't. It would take a further 2 years of Sweden clinging to Lady Liberty, screaming, don't wanna, not gonna, before anything changed. The requirement was finally put into place in 2012. But not before Sweden was forced to pay a hefty €3 million fine to the European Commission.
This just is a good reason to point out why you don't want to be part of a union or be it the United States or part of the European Union. Being part of these unions, they come with strings attached.
Oh, yeah, big time.
And this is the same reason why people were so uptight about the masks or taking money from the U.S. federal government in New Hampshire over the masks.
Right.
It's because they had strings attached.
Yeah, exactly right. Good reason to secede peacefully from whatever these organizations are. The lengthy delay was caused by arguments over how best to balance privacy laws and the desire to combat crime. But
there's no balance. You've just eliminated privacy if you're requiring them to log.
However, the dance didn't end there. In 2014, the Court of Justice of the European Union invalidated the Data Retention Directive.
So I was right.
The court found it seriously interfered with human rights. So pretty much as soon as the ruling was announced, Bahnhof, which is one of Sweden's leading ISPs, started destroying all the data they were obligated to hold. Bahnhof CEO John Carlung also said that Bahnhof would stop retaining new data immediately. Of course.
So you know what I'm wondering though is when they have this directives in Europe, it's the states that are obligated to then implement them into local law. I would think that just because the the European Union directive was overturned at the European level, the law would still exist in Sweden that they passed.
I don't know how all that works.
I don't either, but I would think that the law would still exist until the Swedish government, threw it out.
It doesn't sound like the ISP in this case gave a damn about that, because they said here they just immediately started deleting the data.
Right, and which is what makes me wonder what the story is, if that is in fact the case, because that's what I would think would be the case.
If you live in Europe and you can call us up here at 603-283-6160. So the EU demanded that Bahnhof had to start harvesting data again, but the Swedish government had no intention of forcing them to do so. Sweden started its internet existence the right way, and it seems like the country is prepared to stand its ground to keep it that way. In the 1990s, the public was just getting on board with the internet, but they weren't really sure what to do with it. In the early days, it was very much like Tor is now. It was wild and free, but if you wanted to go to a specific website, you had to remember the whole URL address. And sometimes they were really long. Remember the GeoCities chat groups? I don't. It required a Darren Brown-esque display of mental prowess just to even turn up at the right place. Search engines eventually arrived to add a structure that made sense to people. Algorithms indexed the content of the internet, making it accessible to everyone who could type a word or two into a search bar. But it was Google who emerged as everyone's de facto homepage. Google controlled 65% of internet searches, and this was in 2016. I think it's higher than that now. And their influence is staggering. Naturally, this doesn't give them a free pass in Sweden. When Google apps breached the nation's privacy laws, they were promptly banned, because the first rule of the internet in Sweden is you don't mess with the internet in Sweden, they say. Sweden adopted the internet early due to standing regulations that promoted competition across the country. That meant that internet access costs were, and still are, way below the global average. The take-up was so high that the government started to move its services online long before any other even thought about it. In 2003, Sweden created the first Internet Task Force, which in turn came up with the Sweden Electronic Communications Act of 2003. The act was aimed at ensuring private individuals, legal entities, and public authorities had secure and efficient access to the Internet. Not only were they looking to protect users, but also make the Internet more robust and accessible. I don't know if the government can do those things. But in 2008, when everyone else was still buying their books from real bookshops, Sweden headed the UN's e-government readiness test because, of course, they did. They'd been doing it for 5 years already. And then they addressed the Tor network here. Tor has taken the crown from computer games as the go-to scapegoat of choice for lazy politicians looking to overreact about something. The Tor network is the anonymous, uncategorized service that you may know as the dark web, but it's not just full of criminals and girls with dragon tattoos. It's where the discerning internet user goes when they don't want to be spied upon. Coupled with a VPN service, Tor is, well, utterly impenetrable is what they claim, but we know that the U.S. government and other governments around the world have managed to take down many a darknet website, including virtually all of the Silk Road competitors that have come up since they arrested Ross Ulbricht back in the day. So I wouldn't say it's impenetrable.
I think there's a little bit of how it says you kind of have to put a sort of a couple additional words in there, and that is Tor has not been broken for the most part. It's the applications that you use with Tor. So depending on your setup, you are potentially protected with Tor still. It's just that a lot of people were not using Tor in the most secure fashion.
Fair enough. Well, that said, people are getting screwed over pretty royally. So, I mean, just Tor itself may be good, but it's still hard to know exactly how all this governments are.
It can give a false sense of security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Researchers from the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory developed Tor as a safe way to transmit U.S. intelligence around the world. The reasons for opening Tor up to the public are as schizophrenic as they are genius. Despite being Tor's loudest critic, the U.S. remains its largest contributor, closely followed by Sweden. A branch of the Swedish government, SIDA, has a goal of promoting, quote, internet freedom for global development. But why do the Swedish care so much about not just their own privacy, but the rest of the world too? And then they get into about the Nazis. They say it all began long before the internet existed. In 1766, Sweden became the first country to introduce a constitutional law which abolished censorship and guaranteed freedom of the press. The press were allowed to report without hindrance, and people could speak their minds without fear of reproach, which that I did not know. Normally the United States gets all the credit for having the First Amendment, but that came after 1766. Yeah. So very interesting.
And I think that the United States gets a little too much credit sometimes, especially because there's this thing called copyright. And, well,
that's not free speech
that
at all,
undermines
right?
that very it's in the Constitution. There's a reference to copyright, basically. And it undermines the very First Amendment rights that you've got. So and the courts in recent years have effectively ruled to that effect. Even though the Constitution only references copyright, it isn't in theory it should not be at the same level as the First Amendment, because effectively the First Amendment is in the Constitution, whereas it simply says that the law may be created effectively in regard to copyright. So you would think First Amendment would still trump copyright law.
You would think.
But that's not how the courts have ruled.
The Nazis then showed up. The Nazis pressured Sweden not to publish anything which made the Third Reich look bad, in a move which must have had him rubbing his hands and cackling with evil glee. The German Minister of Justice at the time dug up an old Swedish law which prohibited offensive writings against a foreign state. A law presumably introduced because Sweden is lovely and didn't want to be rude. Many Swedish authors and publishers fell foul of this blatant misuse of power. Tor Nerman got 3 months in prison for an anti-Hitler column, and Israel Holmgren had his book The Nazi Hell pulped after he was locked up for writing it, of course. In a magnificent bit of ballsy defiance, Holmgren immediately republished the book upon release from prison, though with a new ironic title, The Nazi Paradise. After World War II, the Swedish changed and deleted the old censorship laws, lest any future fascist dictator try to turn their own politeness against them again. A new privacy charter was drawn up, which means today there's absolutely no censorship in Sweden at all. As suggested by the SIDA program mentioned earlier, Sweden doesn't just take care of themselves. Internet privacy is a global concern, after all. When WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden dropped the snoop bomb on the world, which, by the way, was a decade ago that happened, it was Swedish ISP Bahnhof, the same provider who destroyed their customer records, mentioned earlier, that Julian Assange trusted to keep the whistleblowing documents safe. Assange specifically mentioned the Swedish constitution, which gives total legal protection to information providers as a factor in his decision to host his files there. Also, the servers were installed in a secret underground mountain bunker, and if you're going to take on the world's governments,
that's a PR stunt.
You might as well get yourself a sweet lair. The Swedish approach to privacy and freedom of speech was instrumental in getting the word out there. We had no idea as to the scale of the snooping laws, or the snooping, until WikiLeaks showed us. Thanks to a brave few individuals, big governments have been rumbled and exposed. And then finally, they say, why is Sweden at the forefront of the internet and its laws? There's no single reason, but the kingdom has a long and proud history of free speech. I didn't know it was a kingdom either. And their torrid time next to Nazi Germany no doubt strengthened their desire to stick it to the man. The early adoption of the World Wide Web meant Sweden created an infrastructure while most countries were still waiting for mom to get off the phone so we could plug in our modem. Perhaps there's a sense in Sweden that they were there first and they want to keep it like it used to be. The well-endowed government got involved early, long before it was all about the spying, controlling, and selling. They did it right in the innocent days, back when email was just a good idea to save paper, and no Nigerian prince desperately wanted to give you free money. The rules were in place before the system got corrupted. Simply, the internet in Sweden started right, and now they don't want to go backward. And why should they? The people that work in the Swedish government today grew up with the system. They don't know another way, and their way works. Sweden has consistently been a vocal proponent of internet privacy and the true internet to boot, the internet without censorship as it is meant to be. This is the internet that was supposed to be for everyone. So a nice little puff piece there for Sweden. Although, like I said, it is a little bit old. I don't know what the current status is. If you do, maybe things have changed since 2016 out there, and you want to weigh in, feel free. We've got Shortwave Surfer on the line here, calling us on our SIP line at sip.freetalklive.com. You can get the instructions on how to call in. Go ahead, Shortwave Surfer.
Hey, it would seem to me that the best thing to do would be to host a darknet market on Tor via an IPFS, because then it couldn't be taken down, because the website itself would just be a hash somewhere, and anybody can access the hash just like Tornado Cache.
So IPFS, we're getting a little bit, we need to kind of explain terminology here. IPFS, as I understand it, is a decentralized web hosting system. Is that right?
It's a decentralized file system, so you can put any file you want there.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put up HTML and stuff like that for a website and then just reference it to a Tor URL.
You know what else actually is potential benefit of that too, is that Tor, you need to be, in order to access an Onion site, you need to be connected to Tor.
That's right.
But with IPFS, generally you go through what's called a gateway, and there's all these gateways all over the place. And so that's actually a really, really, really good idea.
So running IPFS over
Tor. So basically you're, exactly. So you're running IPFS on Tor, you're routing it through Tor, but people can access it through the normal web, like any browser, simply by going to the IPFS address. And if one particular gateway blocks it,
hold on, you don't need special software to go to an IPFS?
Well, you need a
I've
gateway.
never done it, so.
You need a gateway to access an IPFS address. Unless you're running IPFS itself.
I see.
But there's lots of gateways out there.
These are websites that you can go to?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're websites. So you go to, like, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Like, I don't know, like Pump. I don't think Pump.io, but
it has one.
Say what? Say again?
You could just go to the IPFS. I want to say the IPFS main site has one.
It does.
You just go to the IPFS.
Yeah, is it like IPFS.io or something like that? But anyway, yeah, it's like if you go to IPFS.io and then / like basically like a hash of the website you're trying to access, you'll get to the website. If IPFS.io blocks it, you just go to a different gateway and use that same hash to get to it.
Yeah, for all the time I've heard about IPFS, I've actually never taken the time to really explore it. And
it's pretty.
Check it out.
It's sort of popular, but it's still kind of getting off the ground, I think.
Shortwave Surfer, is there more you wanted to share?
That's all.
Thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. You can bring up absolutely anything you want to discuss. Take control of the airwaves. Coming up, we'll get into the library latest from the courts on the way.
Free Talk Live.
I don't believe in homosexuality.
Should homosexuality be outlawed, Rita?
I think not only homosexuality, but prostitution and fornication.
Fornication?
Are you going to pass laws against people masturbating?
I beg your pardon, sir.
Would you pass laws against people masturbating, ma'am?
I'm very much offended that you would ask me such a question.
What, you can't answer a simple question?
Would you pass a law against people masturbating?
Sir,
I mean, you want to pass laws against two men having sex. I'm just asking you a question.
She said she wanted to pass a law against fornication. That's just anybody having sex.
Anybody having sex.
Okay, Rita, let's say I have a fiancé and you overheard us having sex. Would you report us to the cops if there was a law against fornication?
You darn right, sir.
Yeah? How dare you?
How dare
who do you think you are?
How dare dare you, sir? Who do you
How
think
dare
you
I
are?
have sex
Except
with a
moral
consenting
reprobate?
adult on my own property?
You're a moral reprobate, and you're one of the ones who are helping to disintegrate this country.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
My name is Jacob Hornberger. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, which Congressman Ron Paul awarded for having an outstanding freedom website. Write us at fff@fff.org, and we'll send you a free 3-month subscription to our monthly journal of libertarian essays and our booklet, Economic Liberty in the Constitution, which George Mason University economics professor Walter Williams praised in a recent column. That's fff@fff.org.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree a deal. Both sides say progress is being made, but most lawmakers have left Washington for the 3-day holiday weekend, with key negotiators staying to try and hash out a deal. Democrats and Republicans are trying to agree to an increase to the country's borrowing limit before June the 1st, when the US is expected to default on its debts. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. Jessica Watkins was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. On Thursday, the militia's founder, Stuart Rhodes, received an 18-year sentence, the toughest handed down so far. A senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. Florida's governor used a live streaming function on Twitter to make his public announcement. FSN's William Denslow reports from New York.
Taking to the social media platform, Fouad Dabiri said he was leaving Twitter after nearly 4 incredible years with the company. No reason was given for why the senior engineer was leaving, but it comes in the wake of Ron DeSantis' glitch-riddled presidential campaign launch. The event was held on Twitter Spaces, an audio-only live streaming platform on the social media site. Technical difficulties forced DeSantis to wait for over 20 minutes before he could make his address. Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have faced blowback for the glitches. But Dabiri says it was enlightening to see how Musk's principles and vision are shaping the company.
An Indiana doctor has been reprimanded in order to pay a fine of some $3,000 for violating a young patient's privacy. Dr. Caitlin Bernard performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio and later spoke about it on television. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II faced a potential assassination threat in the 1980s, according to documents released by the FBI. The documents show that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was concerned about threats from the IRA ahead of the late Queen's trip to the United States. FSN's Sally Patterson reports.
Newly released files outline preparations for Queen Elizabeth's trips to the United States, including an official tour of the West Coast in 1983. An assassination threat was made to a police officer in San Francisco, where a man said he was seeking revenge for his daughter, who had been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. In response, the Secret Service planned to implement extra safety measures, but no details of arrests were published in the FBI files. The late Queen, who died last September, aged 96, frequently travelled during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, remembering the great Tina Turner, who died on Wednesday at the age of 83. There is so much to say about her. American presidents, fellow musicians, artists and fans have all been paying tribute over the last many hours. The New York Times called her a magnetic singer of explosive power, much of which could be traced back to her explosive relationship with former husband Ike Turner and her recovery from that abusive parent. inspiring. In an interview recorded to promote the 1993 film about her life, What's Love Got to Do With It, starring Angela Bassett, Tina Turner credited her spirit and independence to her admiration of former First Lady Jackie Kennedy.
It was what it feels like when you meet an icon, and I'm sure I'm that for a lot of rock people, someone that you have worshipped and watched and mimicked and used as a reference for helping yourself to become a better person, a lady rather than a woman, all of that, you know. When you know you're not a lady, you don't handle yourself in that way. People don't see you as a lady. I always look to try to become a lady, and I think Jackie was a perfect example of a lady.
And so was Tina Turner. She died on Wednesday at her home in Switzerland, an unequalled star on the global stage. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
And the main news again, negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree to a deal. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol, receiving 8.5 years in prison. And a senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. That's Feature Story News. Nick Harper reporting.
It's The Onion Radio News. A new crispy snack cracker will ease the crushing pain of modern life. The dull, all-consuming ache of present-day existence will be slightly alleviated when Nabisco's breakthrough TC McCrispy's line of crackers arrives today. Available in regular, Garden Ranch, and Zesty Cheddar, the new crackers will flood consumers' bodies with fat, salt, and starch to produce a pleasing sensation of warmth and nourishment, momentarily freeing them from a relentless, crushing sense of profound grief. Mel Krychek is Nabisco's Director of Corporate Communications.
Our tasty new snack cracker will, if only for a few lovely moments, significantly lessen the hideously bleak and empty torment of modern life that festers in every solitary soul.
Nabisco expects most despair-riddled consumers to eat an entire box in one sitting. Doyle Redland for The Onion Radio News, online at theonion.com.
You can help spread the ideas of liberty with our Patreon for just $5 per month at amps.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. You can bring up anything you want to talk about here as we kick off the third hour of the show. The number is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Here in the studio tonight, it's Ian
and Chris.
You can join us online over at freetalklive.com. Enjoy the various features that we have waiting for you there. Once again, that is freetalklive.com. I've got the latest filing in the library case. We're not going to read the whole thing. It's 7 pages long, but we'll give you some highlights coming up here about... First, we'll give you a clue as to what the case is all about, in case you've never heard of library or you don't know what's been going on in the last few years for them. It's not good news, generally. But it's not over yet entirely, so we'll see where this thing can go from here. But first, we go to the phones here. Dave Ridley is on the line from RidleyReport.com. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, you caught me with my pants down. I was trying to pull up an article, and I thought I had.
Luckily, it's radio, so if we catch you with your pants down, it doesn't offend anybody.
Well, it's a different kind of pants down. I thought I had this article on my computer, and I don't have it. I was going to talk to you about what was on this article. But have you seen the NH Journal article about NH Exit's aerial banner?
Yes, actually. I actually just pulled it up as you called in because I figured that's what you wanted to talk about.
When was this? When did this get posted? Because
it came out yesterday.
Oh, I hadn't seen it yet.
I hadn't seen it until today after I spoke with the guy who wrote the author, Damian Fisher, and he had already gone to press before he talked to me. So the article had said that Freeman couldn't be reached for comment. It has now been updated with my comments, which I hadn't even know. I didn't know that had happened yet, so I'm just now seeing this sort of the newer version of it for the first time. It's a bit of a slanted story.
Of course
as
it is.
Damian Fisher is wont to do, but the headline, for instance, is convicted Bitcoin money launderer now wants New Hampshire to secede.
Yeah. Okay. So the whole NH exit thing has been going on like a decade. Okay. It's just ramped up in recent years.
Yeah. Just it happened to coincide with the Feds.
If anything, people responded to what happened with the Crypto 6 thing. It's the result of a lot of people supporting NH exit now, but it has nothing to do with
the term NH exit, didn't really take off for the last couple of years. Until the last couple of years, the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, of course, has been around for more than a decade at this point, and I have been advocating for them for a very, very long time. I've handed out thousands of their flyers personally over the last decade. So to say that only now that I've been convicted that I want to secede from the United States, ridiculous. But Dave, what were your...
NH exit was started long before you were convicted anyway.
Yeah, I think, Dave, you've been repping NH exit for some time, right?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to 2016. It's just it's a sort of a child of Brexit in a sense.
Right. Yeah. So what were your comments on this story?
Well, it was just the headline itself is so interesting. How this reporter is just so eager to how can I push this just as far as I can without making a full-blown libelous, complete factual error? How can I make a factual error that's just implied, right?
Yeah.
So when he says that you just now, it's like he's implying that you just now support independence because of the fact that you were targeted, right? That's what the headline is meant to imply,
right?
Without quite.
And Ridley, you're the one who got it off the ground. You're the one who started it. You're the one who instigated it, not you.
Well, to be fair, Dave is interviewed in the piece, so Dave gets a couple of comments. Dave said, Washington is the reason we can't have nice things, he's quoted as saying in the story. And he did quote you as saying, Dave, at that quote, in part, this is a reaction to federal raids on New Hampshire's Bitcoin businesses. So maybe
the whole idea with independence is it's supposed to be like a gas tank, and whenever the federal government does something, you turn that into a gallon of gasoline and you put it in your gas tank, right? And over time, in theory, they start not handing you that. They stop doing things like that help fill the gas tank. Does that make sense?
He did update the story here to say Freeman said Friday the plane has nothing to do with his convictions and is not sure what Ridley is talking about.
That doesn't sound like a direct quote, was it?
What's that, Dave?
Another thing that he likes to do is kind of make it look like we're all internally fighting.
Yeah,
but I think it's obviously connected in the sense tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is you're taking advantage of these last few weeks or months of freedom and spending some money on just kind of going out with a blaze that related and so the conviction is very closely related to the aerial banner in my mind. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it just is coincidental, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole New Hampshire exit thing happened to really take off after the Crypto 6 raid. It was 2021 when Crypto 6 raids happened against us. For listeners that don't know, you can go to the crypto6.com. You can watch the raid video and learn more about what they did to us. But it was that summer that you had called the show, Dave, to talk about what can we do to move this thing forward. And then Aria and I said, well, we can put up some money to help you move this thing forward. And then we found some state reps that wanted to put forward a bill to allow people to vote on independence. I mean,
how I've been involved in this.
Things just fell into place,
I've been involved in this too from the beginning. And, the way I'm looking at it, not the decade, but I mean like, the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But if you look at like the progression of things, I think you can attribute the support going from 0 reps willing to support New Hampshire independence to 13 to the FBI raids involving the Crypto 6. But that had nothing to do with you supporting, independence, because you supported independence long before that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I've always been somebody who puts whatever money that I have available behind activism. That's certainly nothing new. We were just discussing during the break, Chris, that I was the executive producer of Derek J's Victimless Crime Spree, and that was done before I don't even think I had any Bitcoin at that point in my life. That would have been like 2011 that we were producing that movie. It came out in 2012. So, if I had any Bitcoin then, it would have been a scant amount and it would have been worth anything. So certainly, I'm more than happy to put good money behind good activism.
Under Ian's list of activism, this is one in a long laundry list of things. And it's not I don't even think it's been that significant by comparison to just, other projects that you've done.
Yeah, the good news about the liberty movement, and specifically the secession movement here, is that there are multiple groups that are involved in this. So as much as Damian Fisher here, the journalist, is trying to portray me as, the leader or whatever it is, or as the front man.
Don't they always love to do that? Portray you as some sort of like God? It's really funny, which is the same reason the FBI is so interested in you, is because they have this perception that you're like behind the whole Free State Project, even though you're not.
I mean, I've been around for a long time, and I got a radio show, so I'm visible. I've got freekeen.com, which
and that's
is
one of the reasons I don't like you.
A noteworthy website, a blog site up here, but there's a lot of great organizations here, including the Foundation for New Hampshire Independence, the NHI PAC, which is the political
and things
action
that you
committee.
have nothing to do with, right?
Yeah, I'm not on the boards of any of either of those organizations. That's for sure. Anyway, go ahead, Ridley.
So you've got the article in front of me, and I don't. So what else in there is amusing? Because I only read about the first third of it before I archived it and said, I need to call in about this, and then I lost it.
I mean, it's just, kind of drags me through the mud as it typically does, where it kind of brings up all the allegations in the Crypto 6 case and talks about how, what the prosecutors had to say about me, all the allegations that, of course, I've been found guilty of by a quote-unquote jury of my peers. So because the jury found me guilty, the media gets to call me a money launderer, right?
If you're found guilty, you must be guilty, right?
That's legally that's what they get to say.
It's legally true, but not necessarily actually true.
Correct.
But everybody's found guilty now.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
At the federal level.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the statistics, it's something like 98% of people plead guilty, and those who take it to trial is something like 78% get found guilty. So it's not necessarily the case that just because somebody has been convicted of something that they actually are guilty of something.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of here that's
another.
Go ahead.
That's yet another grievance that is or should be part of what's driving us toward independence. I mean, your case is just littered with grievances, that any one of which would justify independence.
No doubt. And they will continue to provide us with reason after reason to justify independence. And, right now it isn't popular. He did ask me, and he put one of the quotes in here, the article where I said, right now it's not very realistic. That is to say, independence.
Oh, no.
And then there's a long way to go to change people's minds. There are a lot of questions that will need to be answered. This is one of the things that I said to him that he included here in the story. So, I mean, I would say it's a better story now than it was when he first published it, because he didn't have comments from me in there previously. But, the whole end of the story, like the last half of the story, has nothing to do with the with secession or the airplane, and it's just a recap of Crypto 6, and then further he talks about how I got banned from the Free State Project, or not formally distanced itself from Freeman due to I advocated the lowering of the age of consent. Yeah, so I mean, just dragging everything out, essentially. And this is, I think somebody else put this as shooting the messenger. I think this was on social media because, secession bad. Look, Ian Freeman's involved with it, right? Like, that's what they're trying to do.
It was neat to see the response to that. It's just the guy's just turning you into a martyr, and the movement. It seemed like all the liberty activists were just rallying around you on the internet. But, as someone who, I technically survived the secession crises in the Balkans, bits and pieces of them, I was there for part of it. And the thing that people don't understand is how fast independence goes from 0 to 60. People just weren't thinking about it in Slovenia, and then all of a sudden they were independent. And same thing in Croatia, same thing in Bosnia. All three of these places came out slightly ahead of where they would have been if they hadn't declared independence against this genocidal regime in Belgrade. And again, the Belgrade government made it happen. They made it possible. Otherwise, Yugoslavia would still be together. And that's what the Feds are going to do. They're going to make it impossible to be in the same country with them.
That can't happen soon enough.
I agree. And the whole point of this airplane that we're going to be doing, which is, again, an aerial banner. I don't know if we really talked about the details on that, but it's going to fly over Concord and Nashua and Manchester tomorrow for several hours in total. So it's going to be a long flight. And the point is to raise awareness, because a lot of people don't know about secession. They don't know that there was a movement, or that there is a movement. They don't know that there was a bill last year. A lot of people are completely in the dark about this, so they're going to be able to look up at the sky and they'll be able to see a positive message about it.
I don't know if we want to talk about the statistics from the polling done yet, but I will say this much. I was surprised at the percentage of the population that had actually heard about CACR 32, which is the Bill for Independence. That was,
I don't know if they heard about the bill numbers specifically, but
I understood
they heard about that there was something
about independence.
Yeah.
That's, the percentage is shockingly high, if you ask me.
I'm not shocked by it.
Really?
You're referring to the fact that there's 50% of people had heard nothing, and the other 50% had a varying heard something. Like some people heard a lot about it, some people heard a little bit about it, some people heard not much.
People heard anything about it.
Yeah. It wasn't very well covered. I mean, that's for sure.
Right.
It was pretty much ignored.
More people, if up to 50% heard something even, that's a lot of coverage, I think.
It is. I mean, you do have to wonder about these surveys, because obviously the people who take these surveys are people that want to take surveys.
Yeah.
Right? And so somebody who wants to take a survey is probably more likely to be politically connected than somebody who isn't, or at least paying attention to the news. Maybe there's a factor in there for that.
I suspect you might be right, because I suspect if you did a poll on the street, you won't find that.
I wonder about that. Yeah. Of course, it's harder to do a scientific street poll than to do what they're doing here. But
this whole scientific thing, I don't know. This is one of these things where it's like I'm a little bit skeptical, to say the least.
Ridley, anything else you want to share tonight?
Well, by the way, if you're feeling bad about being given such hostile coverage, that guy actually wrote an article about me in 2021 when I was doing that Bitcoin Gandhi thing, when I was dressing up as Gandhi to protest your arrest and marching across the state with a civil disobedience thing. Well, he wrote an article about that, and I've never seen anyone go so far out of their way to make it look like I was some kind of idiot or everything he could find in the time that he had. He tried to make it look. That is, what is there to be against here? I'm just walking down the highway. I'm just planning on handing out a flyer. Is that really, I know that.
No, it doesn't bother me. I mean, it's just what to expect. It's what you expect from, the media. I personally don't mind talking to Damian Fisher. If he wants an interview, I'll do an interview. It's fine. I don't care. I know it's going to be slanted.
You'll talk to the guy writing a hit piece on you.
Yeah, it's fine.
I would recommend whenever you're doing that, even if it's not Damian Fisher, pretty much anyone you're interacting with, it's a reporter and they call you or whatever, you record that stuff. I mean, even when I'm talking to Matt Ungolf,
just make sure you let him know you're recording it. Otherwise, it's a wiretapping charge.
I mean, what?
Really a nice. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, what good though is that really going to do, right? Like, so you have the evidence to show that he's a liar, but we already knew that, and it's not like you're going to get the eyeballs, looking at your audio or I guess the ears listening to your audio, because you don't have that audience that he does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wish it weren't true, but
why are you recording this interview? I'm recording it because does there have to be a reason?
You absolutely have a right to record an interview. Unfortunately, in New Hampshire, one of the worst parts about New Hampshire is its wiretapping laws. I mean, we like a lot of things about New Hampshire. New Hampshire is definitely the freest state, according to the Freedom in the 50 States study. But the wiretapping laws here are the worst. You legally, as I understand it, you have to inform the people you're talking to that you're recording. You can't record. It's a misdemeanor charge if you record a conversation to which you are a party without informing the other people. It's a felony charge if you record a conversation to which you are not a party without the knowledge of the people that are involved there. Now, I'm not a lawyer. That's not legal advice, but that's definitely something that needs to get changed, because even at the national level, even the federal laws on wiretapping are better in that if you are a party to the conversation, you can record it without telling anyone federally. As I
believe there are some nuances to that, though, in regards to, like, if you have a camera in somebody's face, that's
obvious that they're being recorded.
Yeah, that it's I'm trying to think how it would be phrased, but it's effectively notice in and of itself.
Yeah, and there's an argument there, and like you said, it's not real clear in the statutes.
I agree.
So you probably will have to argue that in front of a jury.
You're probably right.
Or a judge.
You're probably right.
If they decide to take you there. Ridley, thanks for the call tonight, man. I appreciate hearing from you.
Mm-hmm.
The number here is 603-283-6160. That's 603-283-6160. Hopefully we're going to see the liberty movement and the secession, the pro-independence, NHExit, whatever you want to call it, movement here become so large at some point that the media won't be able to focus on, Ian Freeman's involved. He sold Bitcoin. Then that there will be other personalities who they'll be able to focus on. And, of course, they will trash those people, too.
Yeah.
But, at least it won't just be me. Let's continue here. Sarah's in New Mexico, because it's definitely not just me. I'm just one guy. I just happened to contact these airlines or whatever, these aerial advertising companies, and found the cheapest one and got into a contract with one of them.
Yeah,
right? Like,
you took initiative on one thing, and it's all Ian Freeman. It's hilarious.
Anyone could have done that. Anyway, Sarah, you're on Free Talk Live in New Mexico. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm on. I got an interesting topic for you. So a woman is suing the Motel 6 here in Albuquerque in Carlisle because she was being raped and human trafficked at the hotel.
Oh, boy.
And then how about this? About none of the employees helped her at all.
How would the employees have known? Was it, obvious?
Did this happen in the hallway?
No, I think they assaulted her in the front lobby or something to force her or something like that. And then she asked for help. All the people that worked there, she asked for help.
And what were they supposed to do?
Well, mind their own business so they don't get messed up by the human traffickers. That's what they did.
So, she's suing the hotel, or she's suing the employees individually?
She's suing the hotel.
Because they got money.
Right.
That's what she wants. She wants the money.
Well, she feels like they're responsible for that they should have helped.
Did they call 911? Did somebody call 911?
Nobody did.
Really? What happened to her? How did she end up getting escape from the grasp of the traffickers?
Well, something, I don't have the full detail. And I was thinking, if she's that out of it, if she's strung out on drugs, if she got trafficked, how is she able to sue? It takes intelligence to sue somebody.
Well, I presume she's off the drugs and she's out of their grasp, and that's why she's suing now.
Well, I was thinking that Dream Center, maybe that.
Or she found an attorney.
Yeah,
she could have found an attorney who has the intelligence and the time to, bring the lawsuit. I suspect that's part of what's going on here. Now, the question is, does a hotel staff have an obligation to protect the people who are at the hotel? And we don't know all the details in regards to what did she say exactly to these hotel staff members. Because if you were to say, please help, I'm being, murdered here or raped or kidnapped or whatever it is that's going on, and someone does nothing, maybe there is an argument that they should do something. Are they legally obligated to do something?
And the other aspect of this is, did the hotel have a policy on it? And if they didn't, is this something that's how is it the hotel's fault because an employee of the hotel
didn't do something.
Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean,
well, the managers or something like that. But this is pretty much like state of New Mexico. Like human trafficking is so horrible, and the thing is that nobody wants to get involved because the people are so afraid of retaliation. So if she did put these people, human traffickers, in jail, they'll come out and stalk you, hurt you for being involved.
Thank you, Sarah, for bringing this topic up. I did pull up a story here. We'll see if we can garner any additional information about it. Coming up here, if you want to comment, you're welcome to join us. 603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Nick Harper. Negotiations to raise the US debt ceiling are struggling to find enough common ground to allow Democrats and Republicans to agree a deal. Both sides say progress is being made, but most lawmakers have left Washington for the three-day holiday weekend, with key negotiators staying to try and hash out a deal. Democrats and Republicans are trying to agree to an increase to the country's borrowing limit before June the 1st, when the US is expected to default on its debts. Another member of the far-right Oath Keepers has been sentenced for their role in the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. Jessica Watkins was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison. On Thursday, the militia's founder Stuart Rhodes received an 18-year sentence, the toughest handed down so far. A senior engineer at Twitter has announced he's quitting the role just days after technical glitches dominated the launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential bid. Florida's governor used a live streaming function on Twitter to make his public announcement. FSN's William Denslow reports from New York.
Taking to the social media platform, Fouad Dabiri said he was leaving Twitter after nearly 4 incredible years with the company. No reason was given for why the senior engineer was leaving, but it comes in the wake of Ron DeSantis' glitch-riddled presidential campaign launch. The event was held on Twitter Spaces, an audio-only live streaming platform on the social media site. Technical difficulties forced DeSantis to wait for over 20 minutes before he could make his address. Twitter and its owner Elon Musk have faced blowback for the glitches. But Dabiri says it was enlightening to see how Musk's principles and vision are shaping the company.
An Indiana doctor has been reprimanded in order to pay a fine of some $3,000 for violating a young patient's privacy. Dr. Caitlin Bernard performed an abortion on a 10-year-old rape victim from Ohio and later spoke about it on television. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II faced a potential assassination threat in the 1980s, according to documents released by the FBI. The documents show that the Federal Bureau of Investigation was concerned about threats from the IRA ahead of the late Queen's trip to the United States. FSN's Sally Patterson reports.
Newly released files outline preparations for Queen Elizabeth's trips to the United States, including an official tour of the West Coast in 1983. An assassination threat was made to a police officer in San Francisco, where a man said he was seeking revenge for his daughter, who had been killed in Northern Ireland by a rubber bullet. In response, the Secret Service planned to implement extra safety measures, but no details of arrests were published in the FBI files. The late Queen, who died last September, aged 96, frequently travelled during the Troubles in Northern Ireland.
From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live. We got time for you if you want to join the show here. The number is 603-283-6160. And, of course, you can bring up absolutely anything you want to discuss. The number, again, 603-283-6160. As we continue here, it's Ian and Chris in the studio tonight. Coming up later this year, our very own Mark Edge is going to be speaking from a conference in Prague, where he will be October 14th and 15th at the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference. It's taking place in Prague, and it's the place to go to learn about the free cities, so-called free cities, that they claim will be self-governing territories that uphold individual rights and freedoms. You probably, if you've heard Mark on the show in recent, months or years, you've heard him talking about these concepts. They're getting off the ground, some of them, and representatives from the projects in U.S., Honduras, Germany, and Norway will be sharing updates on their progress and explain why you should consider moving there or doing business in a free city. Mark spoke at last year's conference, and he will be back there again speaking this year. You can join him in Prague October 14th and 15th and save 10% on your tickets by using code FTL over at libertyinourlifetime.org. You can learn more and get your tickets there. Let's go to the phones here. Major Payne is on the line in Michigan. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Major.
Yeah, I'm thinking about Sarah's call and these kids that were running the lobby at the Ramada Inn or whatever it was there. I mean, you think about the younger generation. What's the first thing that happens when there's any kind of controversy? They pull out their cell phones, right? Mm-hmm. They don't even want to have a conversation. They talk with their thumbs.
Right.
You think they're ready to go over there and have a fist fight with these guys? Ain't going to happen.
Well, I mean, I think the people that would be advocating, you're referring to the story in Albuquerque about a Motel 6 where a woman alleges the hotel staff did nothing to help her, including they didn't call the police when she allegedly, according to the story, made eye contact with one of the hotel clerks and mouthed the words, "Help me," and nothing was done. She's now bringing a lawsuit against the hotel because they didn't do anything. So, Major, let me just play devil's advocate here. I mean, shouldn't the hotel clerk have gone ahead and called the police? I mean, that doesn't mean he has to go over there and attack the alleged human traffickers and break them away from this woman, but couldn't the person just have called the cops and let them deal with it?
Absolutely, they should call 911.
Well, hold on. What does she mean by, dragged away, first of all, and mouths? Because the person working there might not have understood what she mouthed, because what does that usually mean? Without audio, right? So if you're just looking at, I can't read people's mouths.
I can't read lips. I'm terrible
right?
at it. Yeah.
And then, of course, being dragged was somebody just pulling her on the arm?
The claim is
that doesn't necessarily mean to somebody who's watching that she's being forced against her will.
Yeah, that's true. We don't know what it means.
You can recognize terror in a person's face now. Come on.
Not everybody. Some people can, some people can't.
Well, the claim is she was, quote, physically dragged by her trafficker from the reception office to a room located near the back of Motel 6 in clear view of Motel 6 employees and agents. So, yeah, that is a good question. Is what does it mean she was physically dragged?
Where's the video?
Were her legs on the ground?
Right. It's one thing if somebody is physically being dragged, right? And it's another, like an adult, woman. And if she's just, somebody's pulling her, or taking her by her hand and,
Yeah, that's a good question. Major, so you're saying that you think they could have done something here in this case?
I think they should have done something. Somebody should have done something. If Bruce Willis was behind that desk, these dudes would be dead.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. And apparently, the interesting detail on this story that Sarah didn't have was this particular hotel. It's not the first time. There was a different woman, 20-year-old Albuquerque woman, Toby Lynn Stanfill, was sued the very same hotel in 2020, alleging negligence on the part of the hotel. She was repeatedly beaten, raped, and enslaved at the Motel 6 days before her death. Sorry, it wasn't her that sued. It was her family. The lawsuit alleges she was found dead, lying face down in a pool of blood at a public park with a gunshot wound to the head. The leader of the sex trafficking ring was sentenced to 17 years in prison after pleading guilty to one count of participating in a sex trafficking ring. And Matthew Woods, described as his enforcer, is serving an 18-year federal sentence. In that case, apparently the hotel paid out and settled that particular case, according to a different story here. So this particular hotel is allegedly, according to the Department of Homeland Security, sort of a known hotel for human traffickers. So this is
Motel 6 doesn't have a good reputation. I was only brave enough to stay at one once, but I found crack flake remnants around.
Yeah.
The TV was bolted down. The furniture was bolted down. The only thing that wasn't bolted down was the Gideon Bible in the drawer next to the bed there.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is an ugly situation, but I still have to wonder if the individuals here, the hotel staff, can be held liable for this. I mean, obviously, they're not being sued. It's the chain or the owners of the hotel who are being sued.
Is this negligence in that they didn't have a policy on like what to do in the case that they like? I want to know where the liability comes from, because you're effectively trying to hold somebody liable for the actions of a third party.
Or was there even a camera system anywhere in this place?
Is there some obligation for there to be a camera system? I mean, obviously there was a time before cameras.
Well, this is recent, but yeah, I see what you're saying. In this case, the question is there an obligation to act, right? Not because the hotel staff didn't do anything, but what is their obligation to do something?
Even if there's an obligation for somebody to do something, is that the hotel, right? And obviously an employee of the hotel maybe should have acted for moral reasons or even legal reasons, but it's not clear to me that the hotel, the person who owns the hotel, the shareholders, should somehow be liable because an employee, didn't do something.
Right. How can you know what an employee is going to do in any given
what contributed to these rapes?
Go ahead, Major.
All they had to do was hit the fire alarm or something. I mean, come on. But I got a dog to fight with you here, Ian. You say you've never been on a debate team? I think we should debate that.
Okay.
I think you are the president of a debate team. You run a debate every night.
No, this isn't a debate show. This is an opinion show. There's a panel discussion here. People here have different opinions. Debate is a structured thing. People take turns. They have a specific amount of time with which to speak. There's a judge. There's an audience. There's a vote before and after. This is not a debate.
Now we got to debate the definition of debate.
That's cute, Major Payne. Thank you for the call tonight, man. I appreciate it. If you want to comment here, you can join us. The number is 603-283-6160. So the woman in this case has not been identified. The case has been filed as a Jane Doe so far. And again, she claims she made eye contact, hoping that would stress her desperation, and mouthed the words, "Help me." And certainly if an employee is at a scuzzy hotel, right? Let's just say this is a scuzzy, low-life, low-rent hotel. That's what it sounds like, right? They're saying here in the story that the Department of Homeland Security says this hotel has long been used by traffickers, human traffickers, as a hotbed. So there have been other instances, including another lawsuit a few years ago. So, this sounds like a place where you're going to find some real low-life characters. And these people are dangerous, right? If your job is to just check somebody in and not ask too many questions because they're either there to do a drug deal or they're there to have sex with a hooker or they're there to, whatever other things that people do in these hotel rooms, it's none of your business really what's going on in there. And if you make it your business, they may make you their business. And I suspect that is one reason why, even if the employee did make eye contact with this woman and could read her lips and was able to know, okay, this woman says she needs help, he may have been or she may have been scared to do something. Maybe they know who these people are. Maybe these guys or whoever it was that had her captive, maybe they're regulars at this hotel, and that these guys are a dangerous crew, and you don't want to potentially be considered the one who snitched them out.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, this is the problem with these or the types of laws that require you to come to assistance, like they passed in, I think, the 90s in Massachusetts.
There are things like this.
Right. But the problem is, well, what happens if that person, is some sort of heroin, sex trafficker? You're requiring them to put their life in danger at that point.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that seems like a moral issue. Like the law is morally flawed.
Of course it is. And no one should have an obligation to act. As you said, Chris, should they have? Maybe they should have. There's an argument from a moral perspective that if you could do something, you should do something.
The problem with this is we're not in a position to judge that employee.
Right.
We
weren't
don't
there.
know what happened. We don't know what the circumstances were.
Yeah. We don't know.
And the law certainly doesn't.
Yeah. Well, of course, laws don't care about individual circumstances in a lot of cases. And so this is a really tragic story, and I'm sorry to hear about it. Luckily, this woman survived this particular situation, but it's hard to place blame on the individuals in this story who did nothing, because it's probably pretty intimidating dealing with, human traffickers or whatever these guys. They probably look like intimidating characters.
There's some other factors that we also might not be considering here. For example, often police are on the take,
Sure.
So even if this guy had called 911,
maybe nothing would have happened.
He may have already known nothing was going to happen.
Could be.
And his life would have been in danger.
Right. Or if the cops do show up and then the human traffickers want to try to figure out who called the cops, well, that's public information, right? That person would be called at a trial ultimately later on down the line, in theory.
Yep.
And that's, or they could just make an assumption that it was the front desk clerk and just send one of their buddies after him or something.
It wouldn't surprise me if there was not many people working. This is a Motel 6, right? I mean, these are usually not
low staff.
I mean, they're not like, they're not going to have tons. There's probably one staff person working at the front desk.
Yep, especially if it's at nighttime.
Yeah.
Let's talk to Tim. He's in Florida. You're on Free Talk Live. Go ahead, Tim.
I was a night auditor at a hotel, and a different night. Maybe I'll tell you how I lost that job, because it is related, and it was kind of my dream job, and I was the only employee there. But actually, I called because just before I lost my job, during the Trump administration, there was some sort of, I don't know if it was an executive action or if it was actually passed through the legislature, something passed regarding human trafficking, which included the hotel's responsibility that if they were aware that prostitution is taking place on their premises, that they must notify the police immediately. Otherwise, they'll actually be implicated, basically as providing...
This is in Florida?
It's actually federal.
Federal?
Yeah, I think I remember when this happened, when they passed this law, and I thought it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Basically, if you knew that it was happening at your hotel and you didn't say anything,
how would you know?
Then you would actually be considered to be one of the human traffickers.
What is considered to be knowledge, though? I mean, this would have been at best a suspicion, at least according to the case that we're talking about here.
I think the other issue here is, even if you have a policy on this, what happens if the employee doesn't, abide by your policy that requires them to report it? Are you still liable, or are you not liable because you had a policy on it?
Well, they let me go, and it wasn't exactly the same situation. I don't even want to get into it.
Okay, but what does it mean to have knowledge of the situation, right? Like, if somebody explicitly tells you something, then I guess you have knowledge. But in this case,
I would say a reasonable, what would be considered a reasonable suspicion, like, for example, it's a bunch of things. You can't just profile someone and be sure, because people dress up like that anymore. It's not just a prostitute that dresses up like that, but you take all the facts about the situation, who they're with, what they're talking about. Like you hear a lot of conversations in the front lobby, and but yeah, I don't know. She has some legal grounds to sue the hotel, whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like they've got a case simply because it already happened previously. There was somebody else who had a similar circumstance, and their family sued, and they got a settlement from the hotel owner in that case. So yeah, maybe so. Tim, anything else you want to share tonight?
No, I'm going to drop off.
Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. The number here is 603-283-6160. And what he was saying there is if you're saying it's a federal law that if you have any knowledge of prostitution going on, which is different than human trafficking.
Yeah.
And this is something that
that's when they say human trafficking, they're including prostitution.
I know, that's the problem. You see this happening all the time in recent years, is whenever there's a discussion about, let's say, legalizing prostitution.
Yep.
Now, I've been to these hearings at the State House. They always act like every prostitute is a human trafficking victim.
Nope, not the case.
And it's like, no, it's a minority of prostitutes. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a minority of them, because thankfully there are actual prostitutes that will come in there and they'll say, I do this because I make money.
And you
this
know,
is
the
why.
disturbing part about it is they've actually forced people into the human trafficking business by outlawing things like Backpage, which enabled prostitutes to basically work for themselves as opposed to working for a pimp.
Right. Yep, that's true. And just to be clear, I mean, I don't know what every pimp-prostitute relationship is, but there's no guarantee.
The assumption here is that they're all human. Everybody who's working for a pimp is human trafficked.
Yeah, that's the assumption, but that's not per se true.
Right.
I mean, a pimp can be somebody who provides legitimate protection services to a prostitute and provides clients to the prostitute. So it could be a you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of situation. You shouldn't jump to a conclusion.
And the humorous thing about that is the problem is the criminalization of sex. That's the problem. If it wasn't criminalized, the pimp wouldn't be a problem, because if there was a problem, you could go to the police. But when sex is criminalized or the sale of sex is criminalized, you have a pimp and you can't get out of that relationship because you can't go to the police, because then you get arrested.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the solution here is, as you're suggesting here, to end the prohibition on prostitution in the same way that the solution to the problem with drugs is to end the war on drugs. You end prohibition and you can bring these products and services into the light. You can bring them into the light of a relatively free market. Even a regulated market is better than what we have now, with people risking STDs and risking prison and risking their lives in order to do this business. And it's a business that's not going to go away. They call it the oldest profession for a reason. It's been around for a very, very long time, and no amount of undercover sting operations and however many millions of dollars they've been pouring into enforcement on this over the years, no amount of it is going to end prostitution. And we've all seen the stories of prostitutes getting picked up, getting arrested, getting maybe a little bit of time in jail, right back out on the streets to go back to doing prostitution, because that's what they know. That's how they make money. They can make way better money at that than working a job at Walmart.
Well, and whatever. The disturbing thing too is the police know this. They know when they arrest the prostitutes
they're going back out.
They're just going to go right back out there once they're released. Even before there's a trial, or there probably will never be a trial, but before there is some sort of conviction, those prostitutes are back out there on the street working the job.
Sure.
It's not like you've actually done anything to stop prostitution by arresting them.
They're just padding their arrest records.
Yep.
And prosecutions padding their conviction records.
It's really absolutely disgusting that to protect and serve, but it's not to protect and serve you. It's not to protect and serve the prostitutes. It's to protect and serve the government, the establishment.
And in this case, they're not really protecting any business, right? Like normally with regulations, there's an industry that is promoting the regulations so they can restrict competition. But considering this industry is completely illegal, who are they really protecting here?
Yeah, it's not even like the drug industry, like the legal drug industry,
right? Like
ban
pharmaceuticals,
weed or something like that,
yeah.
Right? It's a good question. There is an industry that maybe benefits potentially from the prohibition, possibly with maybe arresting pimps. Maybe a pimp would get some time in a cage, and the prison industrial complex would, because there's private prisons that benefit. So maybe there is some, somebody making money off it, but I don't know.
Not directly. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's a stretch. It's probably true to some extent.
There is another group that's making money off of it for sure, 100% guaranteed. I can tell you this with 100% certainty. That is the law enforcement officers themselves, because they need to make it look like there's crime in order to justify their paycheck.
Yep, that's true. The number here is 603-283-6160. I did say we were going to talk about the library case. Just a quick update here. They have filed what should be the final filing in this years-long civil case that the folks over at Library, which is an amazing media sharing protocol. You can go to lbry.com to learn more about it. It still exists, by the way. The protocol, it's not going away, as much as that might upset the Securities and Exchange Commission that brought a lawsuit against Library a few years ago. The Library case, unfortunately, was lost by Library and won by the SEC. But the final remedy, or whatever they call this particular portion of the case, it's essentially the sort of like the sentencing in a criminal case, but it's a civil case. So there's another term that I'm losing right now. I think it also starts with a S. It's not sentencing. Settlement. I think it's called a settlement. So this is the settlement, quote unquote, in this case. Not that the case was settled before trial, but that they're settling the details of who gets punished to what extent.
It's such a weird choice of words when you've been found, because you weren't found guilty, but...
Right, responsible or whatever.
Liable, I guess.
Liable. So what's happening now is both sides, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, and Library are filing, or have filed now, their final legal arguments on what the settlement should be. What should the details be of this situation? What should the court issue as a final order in this case? The SEC filed theirs within the last couple of weeks, and it essentially said, we want $111,000, and we want Library to, disband. We want them to burn their library credits, which they said they were going to do. They dropped the demand for $22 million, I think it was, in that case, because they acknowledged that Library doesn't have that kind of money, and so there's no way they're going to be able to get that blood from the stone.
I think if it's a civil case, it would be defaulted, or in bankruptcy it would go away. So I bet you that's why. And if it was criminal, it wouldn't be.
I see.
So that's probably why they
bailed on that.
Yeah, they bailed on that.
The Library filing just came in today, and it's 7 pages. They have a few points here, and the main point is they are arguing still, and I guess this hasn't been decided yet, that the Commission, the SEC, lacks authority to regulate digital assets or impose relief. And they bring up what's called the Major Questions Doctrine. So I'm just going to read this excerpt here. It says, it forecloses the Commission's efforts to regulate digital assets, including LBC, and impose injunctive and monetary relief without specific congressional authorization. Courts consistently presume that, quote, Congress intends to make major policy decisions itself, not leave those decisions to agencies. And then they cite a 2022 case, West Virginia versus the EPA. This was the case that actually got brought up in the Crypto 6 case. It was dismissed, I think, in our motion, but essentially it says that an agency's assertion of, quote, unheralded regulatory power over a significant portion of the American economy presents a major question, meaning that a clear statement from Congress is necessary to authorize an agency to exercise powers of vast economic and political significance. And so they're essentially saying here that the SEC does not have that authority. They do not have the authority to regulate cryptocurrency. It's not anywhere in the law. And so they want the court to make a statement about that in their final judgment. And then they also want to ensure that Odyssey and other LBC users are not going to be targeted by the SEC, and also that consumptive sales of LBC, the library credits, are not prohibited, meaning that individuals selling and buying library credits to one another wouldn't be targeted by the SEC. They want the court to do all this. Keep an eye on the case. We'll see you tomorrow night. Free Talk Live is brought to you by Dash Digital Cash. Dash is the cryptocurrency designed to be used for spending. In addition to being one of the world's first cryptocurrencies, Dash was the first crypto project to have a decentralized autonomous organization that to this day continues to improve and promote Dash. Every month, 10% of the mining rewards go into a treasury. Anyone with one Dash to spend can put forward a proposal to the Dash masternodes to vote on. The masternodes vet the proposals and decide which ones move forward and are funded by the Treasury. In fact, that's exactly how we got this sponsorship. Nowadays, DAOs are plentiful, but Dash paved the way by doing it first, nearly a decade ago. Dash is one of the oldest cryptocurrencies and is widely available on exchanges and in multi-crypto wallets. It's easy to get